Hello, hello, hello. This is Attorney Mike Revan coming to you from Chicago. As usual, we had a wild morning with this one. I thought I'd get in here and give it a proper intro.
See, I'm going to use Miss Fowler's word. She now is in a thruple. And not only does she choose to be in a thruple, and she's shacked up in the bed with the thruple. Now, if anybody thinks this is okay, I am in the wrong world.
Well, there you have it. It looked like they were getting somewhere. Oh, and they're going to do this to me now. Not cool.
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
No, place your screen on mute.
Okay, I'm assuming that's a yes. Okay.
Fine, then we'll have two thruples.
See, I'm going to use Miss Fowler's word. She now is in a thruple. And not only does she choose to be in a thruple, and she's shacked up in the bed with the thruple. Now, if anybody thinks this is okay, I am in the wrong world.
Well, I thought they were fixing to start here. As the say in the South. Hey, Nighty, how you doing? Yes, it's time to reassemble. I'm being good. I'm sticking with decaf here. I'm sticking with decaf. That might end, especially if the prosecutor gets to cross-examine someone again. Good Lord. All right, there's people. I see moving heads. That's always good. I did. I made I made the arduous trek, 1 block to the corner. I haven't had any, but it's there in case of necessity. It is. Indeed it is. It really gets down to whether or not they're going to put this Reconstruction expert on. And I don't do criminal, but I don't see where you do here. I think you've won this case. Get it to the jury. Rest. Give your closing statements now. The judge can read them the instructions, and they can go out and deliberate on this thing. Should take them all of about 5 minutes. Thank you, Duck. I appreciate it. It's healthy, though. Micaholic is healthy. It's good for the soul. Oh. I don't know what happened to John. He might have gotten distracted at the bar here, and I wouldn't blame him if he did. Nigel, you are knighted. You are hereby knighted. You are hereby knighted by Law Talk with Mike. For what it's worth. Should I, for the ceremony, I should have it on. Nigel is hereby knighted. And I hope you get another car. Yeah, I know. Don't you worry, chat. I'm watching you. I know. I see you guys. I see you guys being nice to each other before I start, but I'm busy putting stuff together, so I can't join in there. But I see all that. I see discussions of fur babies and auto accidents and everything else. I know. I lurk in my own chat. I was so hoping. I didn't want anyone to get hurt, but I was so hoping she just inadvertently maced herself, just like a drop, because first of all, it's horrible. It's horrible. There's no way she can cope the rest of the day. Just for comic value, not like some particular animus for the prosecutor. Oh, was I pulling for that? Just for my own amusement. Oh, there we go. There we go. Is it time? You know what? If they're going to do this to me, then I've got no choice but to do that.
Now, you didn't say the cat jumped on his wiener, did you?
And also, it's newer, but really one of my favorites. Really one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah. Without getting into further detail, there were drugs involved that people were giving to me that ended up being glue. Like I smoked some glue and stuff. I thought I was smoking crack, and
I just think it's so fantastic. Judge, yes, I did what was alleged, but you have to understand I was smoking glue when I thought I was smoking crack. So you can see how that justifies all my actions, right? That truly happened. No backpacks for, oh, you're gonna make me do that now too? You guys are you're just baiting me now. I see what's happening. Let me see if I can, there we go. We'll go back to the backpack.
Hey, at least he was thinking about protection.
I mean, from who? Ground?
I mean, he don't know what's on this ground.
Look at baby oil. Maybe that's what I touched. Maybe it was baby oil.
I hope it was baby oil.
Okay, I'm assuming that's a yes. Okay.
Oh.
I was going to ask the chat to take bets on how long before you'd notice that I was here.
I thought I lost you. I thought maybe you went to the car wash with your backpack and we wouldn't see you again.
Do not accuse me of anything close to that. No, my Uber driver decided to take the scenic route through downtown Tampa, which is not that scenic.
It sounds pretty good to me right now.
Compared to this,
I have to say it's that nice crisp fall in Chicago right now, and I actually like that time of year.
I always liked fall in New York. That was always nice.
Yeah, I mean it really makes me want to find a fireplace somewhere and cozy up, you know?
Yeah, we used to do every year. My family was part of the Ancient Order of Hibernians, which is like an Irish cultural group, and we would do something in upstate New York every year, and that was always really nice.
Yeah, I think it's nice. I like winter too, and then it makes me insane. But like the first few snowfalls, I'm like, oh, this is magical every year, like it's brand new.
Yeah, my dad always said that you need 2 snowfalls, one to look at, one to play in, and then we're done.
Yep. I could go for none. Just just leave them up in the Rockies, and I'll go out there and play in it.
Yeah.
Oh, good Lord.
I'm not touching that one with a 40-foot pole.
You know what you should do? You should hunt that thing down and do a stream on it. That's something you would do.
I can find it, probably.
1871. That's right around the same time period as most of the case law that the Sufsit site right there.
I might be able to find that. YouTube would not be happy with it, but it might be fun.
They might be cranky about my thumbnail, but I mean, what do you want me to do? I took it straight from a trial here.
Well, like I told you, they demonetized the afternoon stream that I did, and then on manual review, it took them like 20 minutes this morning to be like, no, we shouldn't have done that.
Well, that's cool. Shut up. Stop. They're baiting me into playing my clips, which, with me doesn't take much.
No, it does not.
Not when you have this kind of quality.
Okay, I'm assuming that's a yes. Okay.
Oh.
Oh, somebody was saying that bad weather is coming toward a clip Fort. Yeah, that would be.
I did get clip Fort Brooks. I don't know how to do that, but it's on my channel. I put it on Twitter.
Now, some people are saying that we've got weather coming my way, but looks like the judge is coming in. Any event, there's apparently somebody told me there's an old thing where the Native Americans engaged in some sort of ritual so that Tampa always gets missed by these sorts of things. And so far, that seems to be accurate.
All right. This got to be the jurors coming in.
Yep.
I missed it, but the claim was during one of our streams that there was a single juror sighting.
Somebody did point out at one point that because of the way that they angled the camera, that they caught one of the jurors. But what are you going to do? New York blizzards are worse than Chicago blizzards because ours are not that cold, but we get that sort of like we get the same sort of lake effect off of Long Island Sound.
Next witness.
The defense will call Debbie Dominguez.
And they're calling a witness. Dummies. Even though they were right last time, I have to admit.
Yes, I do. All right.
Ma'am, go ahead and state your full name for the record.
Debbie Dominguez?
And Ms. Dominguez, did you know Guillermo Arreola?
Yes, I did.
And how did you know him?
I was raised and grew up with the whole family. We lived right next door to each other.
Okay. So he was your neighbor?
Yes, he was our neighbor.
Fair enough.
I'm just going to ask you some very pointed questions, okay?
Okay.
Did you ever witness Guillermo Arreola spray anyone with mace?
Yes.
And who was it that he sprayed?
He sprayed my son Alonzo Dominguez. He sprayed my cousin Joe Chavez, and he sprayed me, but I turned my face and he didn't get me.
So he tried to spray you
Yes,
also?
he did.
Now let me ask, the mace that he used, did it have any dye in it that you were aware of?
No, none at all.
Oh my God. In 3 questions.
Now, when he tried to spray you and you turned your head, had you physically threatened him at all?
No.
Did Mr. Chavez physically threaten him?
No.
Did your son physically threaten him?
No.
Did you know Mr. Arreola to possess guns?
Yes.
And let me back up. The incident that involved the mace, if you know, was Mr. Arreola intoxicated at the time?
You could smell the liquor off of him.
Okay.
So he on a regular basis decides to get drunk and start spraying people with mace. Another fantastic witness.
I don't know how they're getting this in,
Now,
but
do you
okay.
know Dean Cummings?
No.
You've never met
I
this
haven't
man
heard an
here?
objection.
No.
Thank you. I'll pass the witness.
Perfect.
Amen.
Get in, get out.
They're your breadcrumbs, John.
All right, I'm gonna have to copy that and I'll save it for another time.
But if you do that video, you got to do it in period costume.
What do you think? I'm made of money?
Yeah.
Do you know what that sort of shit costs? Okay. I am saving the case, though.
Yeah. They just came in and said this guy's got a propensity to get drunk and pull out weapons and mace. Thank you.
Perfect. We're done.
That's all I had to say.
That's a great way to handle a witness. I don't like. What do you cross them on at that point?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Ms. Dominguez.
Good afternoon.
Oh, here we go.
I'm going to ask you some questions about what you just testified to, okay?
White Claw is not safe.
You said that you've known Mr. Adiola pretty much your whole life. Is that correct?
Mhm.
You grew up together, right?
Yes, but I moved away for 22 years and came back. He was already older. He was a younger kid when I moved away.
Okay. So let's talk about this incident that you testified to. Do you remember doing a pretrial interview with me on the telephone?
Do I remember?
Yes. Do you remember doing an interview?
Was it you?
Do you remember doing an
No.
interview on the telephone?
No.
You don't
You're not
remember
very
doing an interview
memorable.
on the
I don't
telephone?
know. I don't know what to say. Just.
Okay.
My God, I
you
love
have
this
memory
witness.
No.
No, but you don't remember talking about this case on the telephone.
I remember a investigator calling me and asking me if I knew Adiola, if I knew the case about.
Well, do you remember on July 11th of this year, on the telephone, you spoke with me, and I believe the investigator was also on the phone, and potentially an attorney.
And what is your name again?
My name is Jonna Walker.
Are you not an attorney? You said
I
potentially.
remember doing a telephone interview at
What the?
1 o'clock or something like that.
This
Okay,
isn't
so
going
now
well.
you remember that interview.
Yes, I do.
Okay. So do you remember in your interview you told me over
Well,
and over
apparently
that
you're
you
not
couldn't
an
even
attorney.
remember when this had happened? You couldn't give me a date.
I can't give you dates on it. I just know it was like 5 years ago.
Okay.
I don't know dates on all the stuff that went on.
Okay, but you remember the incident.
Yes, I do.
Okay, and this was July 9th, 2017. Does that sound right?
Hey, that's my birthday.
Okay. And do you remember telling me that this was a verbal argument only before the mace came out?
Yes.
Okay, you told me that they had a little bit of a fight.
They were pushing each other like chest to chest, like that kind of a argument. A
Okay.
verbal, like
Who's
going
they?
in front of each other.
Was they your brother, Joe?
No, it was my son. It was my son, Joe, my cousin. Like he was right at us. Him and his cousin, I guess, that lived right next door, would come up and they would bump against each other's chests.
Okay, and that's Mr. Adiola, is what you called him, his little cousin. Is that right?
The one that lived next door. I didn't never know who he was.
Okay, but you referred to him as his little cousin?
I think it's his cousin.
Okay, so it was Mr. Adiola and his little cousin.
Right.
And they were arguing with Joe.
Joe was to the side, my son here, and I was to the side here.
Okay. And you said that they were all pushing each other.
Like going in, when they're yelling at each other and verbally, and they're like right in each other's faces.
So chest bumping and shoving. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And you told me that this was a rumble. Do you remember that?
Well, it was like a rumble. They were like on towards back and forth on each other.
How is this helpful for you?
You were out there with them in this
Yes,
rumble.
I was.
Okay. So it was your son, your brother, and
Just
you
establishing
fighting Mr. Adiola and his little
the direct
cousin
was
in the
absolutely
rumble,
correct.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. But your husband Mario was also there,
You're
right?
confirming the direct.
My husband was there at the beginning and he took off. He said, I don't want to get involved in this. He took off.
Okay. So then it was 4 against 2.
Yeah. And then Tanya was calling the cops.
Okay. So then 3 men, your husband, your son, and Joe.
My husband didn't even get near him. My husband was
But he
off
was
to-
there, right?
Yes, he
Plus
was.
you.
Donnybrook.
Sorry. Plus you. So that's 4 people against 2, right? And you never told the police that your husband Mario was there. Is that correct?
Yeah, because he wasn't there when he took off.
Okay. And you never told police that Tanya, Joseph's wife, was also there, right?
She was up in the yard calling the cops.
Okay.
So
So
she
was she
wasn't
there
where-
in the rumble?
I don't recall her being there. She was up
No.
further up calling the cops.
Okay.
Come on.
If
It
she
doesn't
was
make
there, would
sense.
that be 5 people against 2?
Is this what we're fighting over?
And then you said your son was maced and your brother,
No,
Joseph?
my cousin Joseph.
Cousin. Gotcha. Cousin Joseph was
These
maced.
guys bumping chests.
But I know him by Joe.
Okay.
Come on, everybody
And then
knows.
Joe went into the house and retrieved a pellet gun. Is that right?
I don't recall a pellet gun.
Okay. And he shot it in the air? Do you remember that?
I don't even remember that. I just remember I was holding my son down because I'm like, don't touch him. Come on, he's drinking and that's what he wants, because it's like scary when.
Okay, so he didn't shoot
I don't recall
at
seeing,
Mr. Adiola with
no,
a pellet gun.
I don't recall that at all.
So, and then Mr. Adiola shot the mace, right?
Yes.
And did it break up the rumble?
Pretty much, because then the cops started coming.
Okay. Was your son or Joseph transported to the hospital for this?
No, just the ambulance came and they went in and they washed out their eyes.
Okay. And this was just a verbal argument where you guys
Right.
were saying stuff
Shoving.
back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you yourself was saying stuff back to Mr. Adiola,
Yes,
correct?
because he tells you some ugly things.
Okay. So you said that he was carrying mace. Where does he typically carry the mace? Does he have it in a certain pocket all the time, or?
I have no idea. He just pulled it out and I didn't see him.
Have you ever seen him carry mace before?
How would she know?
Okay.
This first time.
No further questions, Your Honor.
What?
Now, when I use the word fighting, the way that I define that is two people are physically hitting each other.
Right.
So let me ask you this. Were you fighting with Mr. Areola?
No.
Was Joe Chavez fighting with Mr. Areola?
No.
Was your son fighting with Mr. Areola?
No, they were just chest to chest.
Just kind of in each other's faces?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Just for this lady?
Yes.
Yes.
That's supposed to be a
The semantics
When
don't
this
matter.
occurred, were you on
That's
your own
supposed to
property?
be a cross.
Yes, when he
Listen,
came
that's
around,
it.
we were
Yeah.
on my mom's property, yes.
Did you invite him into the property?
No.
Did you invite his cousin onto the property?
No.
Did you have a weapon?
No.
Did your son have a weapon?
No.
Did Mr. Chavez have a weapon?
No.
I would say no questions because I don't want this
Did
redirect.
Mr. Areola's cousin have a weapon?
Yes, he did.
No further questions.
Greg, I'm disappointed.
Thank you.
I wouldn't have asked any damn questions at all because I don't want the redirect.
Yes. Just
The
let
redirect
it
was more
go.
powerful than the damn direct.
Let's focus the jury on it for 10 more minutes
The defense will call
Oh
Joe
my
Chavez.
God.
and argue about the semantics of the description of it.
And bring in more information that's not helpful for the decedent. God damn it. This is the most unprofessional. God almighty. I'm breaking down already, and we're 5 minutes into this freaking thing.
The afternoon's not looking good.
But I'm gonna try and attach to some things that were smart. This was a good witness. They got her in. They got her what they wanted out of it. They got her out, and then they let the prosecution hang themselves.
Yep. That was another defense win.
Absolutely. And you know what? If you have a
Go ahead and state
series
your full
of
name, sir.
half a dozen of these,
And Mr. Chavez, move that microphone a little closer to you.
Okay.
Mr. Chavez, did you know Guillermo Areola?
Yes,
How did you know him?
we kind of grew up together.
And as adults, were you still in contact?
No. Well, other than me being his neighbor.
Yeah, okay, and just
It's
to be
kind
clear,
of
you said you were
interesting
his
that I'm
neighbor.
letting in
Yes.
all of this
Okay.
character evidence against the alleged victim.
Did you ever have an occasion where Mr. Areola sprayed you with mace?
Yes.
And did the mace have any kind of dye in it?
No.
It didn't dye your skin or your hair, or, well, pardon me, or your clothing in any way?
No.
At the time that Mr. Areola sprayed you with mace, were you physically threatening him?
No, we were just like in an argument.
Did you have a weapon?
No, not at that point in time. No.
Not at that point in time?
No.
Okay. At the time that Mr. Areola sprayed you with mace, do you know whether or not he was intoxicated?
Yes.
And was he intoxicated?
Yes.
And how could you tell?
The only time he was really aggressive was when he was intoxicated, which was pretty much daily.
This is eviscerating the state's case. People are asking like why this is important. It's because if he
Prior
had
to
a
being sprayed with the
non-dyed
mace,
form
had
of
you
mace,
hit Mr. Areola?
No.
Had you threatened to hit Mr. Areola?
No.
Had you gone on to Mr. Areola's property?
No.
Where did this incident take place?
Took place on El Callejon, which is it's a road in front of my home.
The road in front of your home?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know Mr. Cummings?
No.
You've never met him before?
No.
I'll pass the witness.
perfect. In, out, got the point across. Perfect direct.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to ask you some questions now, okay?
Okay.
You've known Mr. Areola. You said you were best friends since you were kids, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about this mace incident. Do you remember when it happened?
Oh, it's been a while. I mean, maybe 3 years.
Would it surprise you
years.
that it was 5 years ago? More than 5 years ago?
Well, the frequency of incidents, I mean, yeah.
So would it surprise you that it was July 9th, 2017?
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Do
he
you
does this
remember
stuff a
telling
lot,
law
you
enforcement
know?
that you were walking with your nephew up the roadway?
Yes.
Okay. And this is the Al Cajon Road, is that correct?
Yes.
And then you told law enforcement that Mr. Areola started to taunt you and talk to you.
Yes, I was in my driveway when they were coming down the El Cajon.
Okay. So, Mr. Chavez, this was a verbal argument, is that right?
Yes.
And then
Somebody said
Mr.
it, identical
Areola
everyone
pulled a
that
can of
he
mace
ever
out of
maced?
his
Yes,
pocket
I would do
and
exactly
maced
that.
you and your nephew.
He was going to mace my wife,
control
and
two
I
people.
lunged in front of her because I wasn't sure what he had in his hand at the time.
Way outside the
Okay,
normal
so let's
society.
talk about
right
this.
there.
I've never maced
You never
anybody.
told the police that your wife Tanya was there, is that right?
Well, if they questioned her, she was there.
Okay.
And it's
Law
also that the
enforcement never
mace that he
documented
used
that your
didn't
wife
have any
Tanya was
dye on
present.
it.
So let's talk about who was there.
Okay.
You were there, and
I
your
was
nephew
there.
was there, right?
It's a cousin that was there.
Okay. A cousin, not your
Yes.
nephew.
Right.
Okay. And Mr. Areola was there? Who else was there?
His nephew.
Okay. And after Mr. Areola pulled out the can of mace, you then went inside your house, correct?
Correct.
And you got a pellet gun, correct?
Correct.
And you shot at Mr. Areola, correct?
Correct.
And you were not even involved in the initial verbal argument, is that correct?
That is correct.
But you decided that you wanted to go down and see what was happening at the end of the road and join in. Is
No,
that
I
right?
did not go down.
You didn't go join in?
No, the argument and the scuffle came to me. I was in my driveway.
Okay. But this was just a verbal argument at that point
Yes.
that you decided to join in.
No, I didn't decide to join in. I just decided to go out there to try to kind of, you know,
And then your wife, Tanya, also decided to join in, right?
yes,
Okay. And you jumped in front of Tanya so she wouldn't get maced, but you got maced.
correct.
Was there pushing and shoving in this rumble?
Yeah, there was a little bit of pushing.
Were you pushing?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. You were just being pushed?
Yes.
Okay. Was Debbie pushing?
No,
No? But this was just words and pushing and shoving, right?
correct.
Was Mario there?
I believe he was in the background. It all happened pretty fast and quick. I mean,
So it's you, your wife, Tanya, right? 2 people. Debbie, her husband, Mario. So that's 4 people.
her son.
And her son. So 5 people against Mr. Adiola and his cousin, you said?
His nephew.
Nephew. So it was 5 against 2. Would that
Correct.
sound accurate?
Yes,
Okay.
So what?
And no one was ever arrested for this incident, right?
correct,
There were no charges.
correct.
And you were a willing participant in this rumble?
What
do you
in
mean by
God's
willing?
green earth does
You
this
could
have to do?
not joined in the rumble and the pushing and shoving, right? You could have just watched them.
Your Honor, I'll object. He's indicated that he wasn't pushing anyone.
I don't think he was giving the
Did you join
observation
in the verbal argument?
option.
Yes,
So you willingly joined into the verbal argument.
yes. This would happen daily.
Okay.
Okay.
You could have gone mute.
Was this the
But
only
what
time you ever
relevance
saw
does
Mr.
any of this
Adiola
have?
use mace?
No,
God, she's just making herself look awful.
Just a moment, sir.
Remember, cross-examination is when you get to testify as the attorney. She's awful at this. I mean, I don't know if you agree, Mike, but this is not helping her at all.
No, not at all. And it is when they brought one out, I thought, okay, that's kind of helpful, whatever. But when you get 2 out, that really does establish a pattern. This guy liked to mace people.
Yeah.
You were never afraid of Mr. Adiola, correct?
And without dye on it. So the whole there's no dye
Yeah, it
in
was.
the trailer goes out the window.
Do you remember talking to me on the telephone, doing a telephone interview?
Yes,
That was back in July, we talked about this case. Do you remember that, sir?
yes,
Do you remember during that interview, you told me you've known him so long that you never were afraid of him?
I was more afraid for my family. I mean,
Do you remember telling me that you've known Mr. Adiola so long that you're not afraid of him?
yeah, I mean,
No further questions, Your Honor.
The defense's
That does very little for you.
it does very little, but they all seem extremely credible
Let me
and
ask.
likable.
Did you and your family members
As
gang up
opposed
on
to the
Mr.
prosecution's
Areola and
witnesses.
his nephew?
no. His nephew, I mean, the reason why I went out there was because his nephew had a large knife on the side.
Well, I think he gets to explain it, and I think that the state has clearly opened the door. Go ahead, sir.
I mean, I went out there to kind of,
Judge.
stop what was probably going to take place. I mean,
Well, wait a
but then
minute.
I ended up in it.
Hang on. Let me back you up.
Okay.
You said the reason you went out there was because Mr. Ariola's nephew had what?
He had a large knife in a sheath on his side.
And why was that concerning to you?
Because I mean, at that point, I believe he was dangerous.
You believed
I
he was
mean,
dangerous?
Yes, because the altercation came to me. They were obviously arguing and coming down the road, so this started somewhere else. But he didn't. He went out and actually was the aggressor.
Who was the aggressor?
Mr. Ariola.
Okay. And you were asked by the prosecution if you ever saw Mr. Ariola use mace a different time, right?
Yes.
And did you?
Yes.
What was that time?
I've got a surveillance.
She asked.
Overruled.
Go ahead, sir.
She's got I have a surveillance camera footage of him macing my dog.
Oh my God, introduce the footage.
And did you ever have any interactions with Mr. Ariola where you were frightened of him?
There was a few, yes. There were several occasions where he would.
Objection, Your Honor. All right, I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Chavez, you're excused.
Oh, come on. You're not going to introduce the footage?
He maced a dog?
He maced a dog.
That's not going to go over well with my chat.
They didn't decide to introduce it though, and I don't know why. Maybe the footage doesn't exist anymore, but that's awful.
Yep. We're already leaning that way, but that does it.
That's really bad, and that's a great witness. And notice how, like, on the defense side, they're quick, they're snappy, they get what they need out of the witness, and they move on because they actually have a plan.
Your Honor, our next witness had a doctor's appointment, and I did speak with him on the phone. He said that he was on his way. He's not here yet. We can begin with Mr. Brudenell, or we can wait a few moments for Mr. Klingler.
Let's take a break, and once you have either one of them here, let me know, and we'll get started. Let's take a break.
And I want to point something out that's going to happen here is notice how much better prepared the defense is to potentially go out of order if they had to.
Yep. What? I knew that Mason the puppy, and the defense couldn't even get that in until they opened the door for it.
Right. No, I mean, that would be totally excluded if it weren't for the prosecution's bumbling handling of direct, or their cross, excuse me.
Okay, so it sounds to me like they're going to do another witness. Is this somebody else who just got maced?
I genuinely do not know. I mean, it sounds like they have somebody that they're ready to go with.
They've got I think they've got the expert. So I think they'll have this witness, the expert, and then I think they'll rest. So that'll take the rest of the day at least.
Yeah, I think they'll be done today, though.
With that bungling cross-examination.
Oh my God, that was a disaster.
Maybe they get done with witnesses today. I could see that. Judge says, "All right, everybody, fire up in the morning. We do opening or closing arguments."
I mean, it's only 2:00 there, though.
Yeah.
Do you think that they go another 3 hours?
An expert?
An expert might go that long.
A reconstruction expert.
Yeah, that might take the better part of the afternoon. But right now, I mean, I can't imagine. Like, granted, they lost the directed verdict as it related to the murder charge. I could easily see a JNOV argument after they put on their case. I mean, this guy has, they've demonstrated this guy has a history of macing people for no goddamn reason, including somebody's dog. He has an absolute temper when he's intoxicated. We have the toxicology report in where he had a mixture of JDS, shut up. I'm the lawyer, you're not. JNOV would be if they come back on the other side. You can still do a motion for a directed verdict. We're not there right now. JNOV's judgment non obstante verdicto, which is judgment notwithstanding the verdict. Don't screw with me on my Latin.
There's a phrase. There's a phrase I've never uttered.
JNOV stands for. But don't screw with me on that one.
This has got to be a not guilty, but I'm fascinated with why they're putting on an expert. I don't think it's required here, but maybe they've got some good reason. And
you say Mike's the lawyer. I'm licensed in more jurisdictions than Mike is, and he'll agree to that.
That is true. That is true. We say so. Well, although I am fascinated to hear the closing arguments too.
I can't imagine where they're going with it.
What do they say?
I just genuinely can't imagine where they're going with it.
How do you close this if you're the prosecutor?
I have no idea.
I know how I close as a defense attorney, but as a prosecutor, I guess I just go out there and say, here's some form of the argument, okay? If I'm the prosecutor, first of all, I would smack around anybody who associated with me who let that trial go that way. But then I would go out there and say, we know who killed him. He admits it. He had the gun. He shot him. Now you're expecting us. Now he wants us to believe that he had it coming and he did us attack, but he didn't prove it. It sucks, but that's the best you can do. The problem is he did.
That is the issue, and he did it through their own witnesses.
Yes. You'll say, well, and then he comes up with this convenient self-defense, theory after the fact, but there's nobody here to refute it because he killed the only other witness. That's what I'm going to argue, but I don't believe it for 1 second.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you have to... The only argument I could think of is getting really, really close. Getting really close to the golden rule argument without crossing that line. Do you want to live in a society where somebody can shoot somebody under these circumstances? You can't say it that way. But that's the only argument I can think of. You'd have to get really, really close without saying it.
Well, here's the thing. This whole time, like earlier in the trial, and this sort of changed my mind. I thought that we would have a not guilty for most of this trial because I just didn't see it going well for the state on any level from about 5 minutes into present.
Yeah.
In fact, I just see it getting worse. However, before that, I thought there's just no way state didn't meet their burden.
Yeah.
The distinction here is, and again, I wasn't there, and I'll never know for sure. But the distinction, now that he's taken the stand, I not only don't think that the state can meet their burden. I really think he's not guilty.
I actually believed
for
him.
real in real life.
No, I genuinely believed him.
I believe his version of events. This guy's a hothead. He went out of his mind. He had a rational basis to think that his life was in danger, and he took him out.
Yeah.
It's not just a plausible defense theory. I think it's what happened.
I agree.
I'll never know for sure, but I'm saying in my heart of hearts, that's my best guess right now as to what actually happened.
Well, and that was the thing, is that everything that he said, one, he came across as credible. He provided a series of events that was absolutely consistent with the evidence that was presented during the state's case. And he does not seem like the lunatic. I don't know. I was a little bit more leaning toward his way for, a couple days last week. But that was based upon the state not being able to meet its burden. But now that he actually went up there, I actually believe him. Some old dude, great points. I always like the phrase, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean people aren't out to get you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe seated.
I don't think so. You do start this case with the defendant saying, I shot the man with a gun. I think that immunizes you from a malicious prosecution by itself.
Sir, can you go ahead and state your full name for the record?
Sure. My full name is Carl David Klingler.
And how do you spell your first name?
Carl with a K, K-A-R-L.
And how did you spell your last name?
Klingler.
Thank you, sir.
And have you ever been maced?
Mr. Klingler, did you ever know a man named Guillermo Arreola?
I had a couple of interactions with him, yes.
I am going to ask you to discuss with us
That's what they were saying, is that either
time that you were
in a short period of time, one of the bullets pierced his heart.
Residence.
Yes. And that was, to be sure, the only time I really interacted with him.
That explains that.
So the other time you saw him, but you didn't actually interact with him. Is that right?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. So this time that you had an interaction with him, that's what we're going to talk about. What were you doing at the Chavez residence?
I had arrived there to...
I thought the same thing.
I think that time...
Same exact thing.
I had responded to a Craigslist ad a few weeks before, and I'd met Joe and Tanya, and then that time I think I was there to drop something off. I think I was there to actually lend Joe some insulin, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Joe has diabetes, and I have diabetes.
Okay. And you initially responded to a Craigslist ad because you were purchasing some medical equipment, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
So Joe and Tanya Chavez at this point in time, it doesn't sound like they were close friends of yours.
That's what you get for
these were just folks
pumping your
that
chest
you were
in Latin.
having a transaction with.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when you arrived at their residence that day, were you able to enter their driveway?
No. They kept their gate closed, and Tanya had asked me to immediately let her know when I arrived there, because she wanted to come out, open up the gate, and let me into the yard so that I could park inside the yard because of some of their previous experiences with their neighbor.
Okay. So when you arrived at the closed gate, what did you do?
So it was just right around sunset, and I turned the car off and turned my lights off, and began texting Tanya just to let her know that I was there. And then
And what happened then?
well, what happened then was that somebody began banging on my car with a hammer.
With a what?
With a hammer.
Okay.
I looked in the rearview mirror, and somebody was just walking along my car, banging it with a hammer, and I knew immediately who it was because Tanya had described him to me.
And you had never had an interaction with that man?
No.
You didn't have any.
And by the way, Mike,
previous
if
beef
you're
with
here,
him?
Nope. We had
You know what he
never
was
met.
actually saying?
Nope. I'd never had any interaction. The last time I had been.
It's a question.
At the
Did the
Chavez
cat jump on
residence,
your genitals?
I had seen him listening through the fence.
I don't know what she's referring to, but I'm just gonna move on.
Okay.
So when you realized that there was someone banging on your car with a hammer, and let me ask you, were they banging on your car with the hammer lightly or hard?
Oh my God, this guy is serial
I'd say about
crazy.
medium. It was about, it was enough to make a dent, or to make dents. It left a series of dents down my car, and it was enough to break he broke my tail light as well.
Broke your tail.
That's a good one.
So what did you do?
Well, I jumped out. I got out, and I was just trying not to lose my temper, and I said, "Why are you doing that?"
Now, without saying what he said in response,
That's not a
did
recommendation
he do
for anyone.
anything
I'm just saying what I
at
would
that
do.
point in time?
Without saying what he said in response,
Physically, what did he do?
he did not do anything at that moment, or he just continued to speak to me and hold the hammer.
Did he threaten you with the hammer?
A couple of sentences later, he did. His initial response was,
You're right.
"I'm
There are
just
more of
teaching-"
those that are alive now because of the circumstance.
When you say that he threatened you with the hammer, just talk to us physically about what he did.
Okay. Well, he brought the hammer back and said,
Objection here. Well, I think it's not being offered for the truth. I think it just goes to his state of mind. It is not being offered for the truth.
I might deny that one.
Go ahead, sir. So he pulled the hammer back, and what was that sentence he said?
when I turned to him, he could see that, I turned and looked at him, and he said, "I will fuck you up."
Okay. All right. I'll stop you right there. I'll pass the witness.
By the way, that was a fantastic defense of an objection, which we have not seen in a long time.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
So let's talk about this incident with the hammer. This was in 2018. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Audiolo, was he walking around your vehicle making dents or only at the back of the vehicle?
He was walking up the driver's side. He just made a succession of dents up my driver's side.
But not only in the back of the vehicle?
Correct.
How is this helping?
He said he was teaching me a lesson initially.
Well, that's...
Remember telling law enforcement that he had hit the back of your vehicle?
Yes.
So you never said all up the driver's side. You said the back of your vehicle. Is that correct?
He started with the taillight and
I'm
then worked his
asking
way
you,
up.
do you remember telling law enforcement?
I would have gotten this witness
he hit the
excluded.
back of your vehicle. You never told them all around your vehicle.
I'll take your word for it.
Oh, that's got to tick her off.
Well, wait a minute.
She's been having a really rough day.
He said he'll take your word for it. You don't get to refresh. Objection.
You're not going to touch this witness.
No.
Do you remember doing a statement for law enforcement?
I do.
Do you remember in your written statement saying that he pounded on the back of your vehicle?
I
He
think
gave
that
it
that
to you,
might have
lady.
been subject to their interpretation, because it turned out later that there was
Okay,
something else
let
they
me
wrote
stop you
down.
there, sir.
Wait a minute. He gets to answer her question. She doesn't get to.
And
He
even
does
if,
answer
and
the
even if
question. Now
we
he's
buy
gonna
your
answer.
version, he still hit my car with a hammer.
He conceded to you. Why are you fighting him?
Were you backing out of Joe and Tanya's driveway?
No.
No, you weren't backing out and almost hit Mr. Audiola with your Jeep.
Oh, no, I had just arrived and the car was turned off.
Do you remember telling law enforcement that you were backing up and that you were looking and there were some items blocking your view? There were signs blocking your view. Do you remember saying that?
I never would have said that.
Do you remember doing a written statement to law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay. Would looking at that witness statement refresh your memory?
Well, what I understand is that law
Sir, the
enforcement,
question is would looking at your witness statement refresh your memory what you said?
certainly.
Wait, where are you going with this? None of this is making the testimony better for you.
It really isn't. But the defense has clearly established this guy as a hothead.
Yes.
Who's like out of like and the actions as set forth by the defendant here are completely plausible given that history.
Oh my God. What in God's name, Mike, honest to God, do you think was going on over the weekend in the prosecution's office?
Not a damn thing, honestly. I think they're phoning this in and they don't expect a conviction.
I don't know, because the behavior and the tone of voice of the prosecution makes me think that they have that they believe they have an argument. But none of this is helpful. He conceded to you and you're still fighting with the guy. Like, why elicit additional evidence that is not helpful for you?
Yeah, the first thing is, didn't you give a statement where you said he was hitting the back of your car with a hammer, and as distinguished from he hit all the way up the side of your car? Okay, either way, he's hitting my car with a freaking hammer. Let's start with that. That's 90% of it. The details are less important.
Yeah, that's the point. It's like, I don't care what parts of the car were hit. The issue is the dude's a freaking lunatic that is willing to use a hammer or mace on people that are not threatening to him.
Yeah. Oh.
I don't understand the theory.
Yeah, like right here. It's good. Yeah, I guess she's trying to show the witness is lying, but
I don't care.
Well, if he's lying, he's made up the story out of whole cloth. That's one thing. But he's telling the investigator that he hits his car with a hammer.
That's the thing. She is admitting for him the substance of the issue.
Yes.
At play.
And they're not even saying that it didn't happen because she's trying to hit him with, oh, well, you almost hit him when you were backing up.
I don't think that's an unreasonable behavior.
Just a couple of questions for you further, Mr. Klingler. Klingler, I apologize. I know I got it wrong before. You said that Mr. Audiola motioned to the jury how he had the hammer in his hand, correct?
Yes.
And he was about 4 feet away from you when he did that?
Say more like 6.
Okay.
I remember the whole thing
Okay.
pretty clearly.
Okay. And you believe that this incident was an opportunity to do Joe and Tanya a favor, right?
They had told me, or
Is this is a yes or no question, sir?
Object to the form of question.
Yeah, good objection.
I don't think he does either.
Okay, I'll ask it again.
Once again, I think that the
Sir,
prosecution
did you believe
lost.
that this was an opportunity to
colloquy.
do Joe and Tanya a favor?
What was an opportunity?
That's my question. What
Calling law, sorry, was calling law enforcement an opportunity for you to do Joe and Tanya a favor?
What does that mean?
Open-ended again.
What the hell does that mean?
yes, they had. There
I
is
were
some
the
background to that
prosecution-
if you
Okay.
would allow
Because
me
it's
to
a
go
prior
into
bad
it.
act, which would be more prejudicial than probative.
And during,
I would try, and if I failed, I failed, but I would at least try. Because it's a prior bad act.
no further questions, Judge.
What a
Yep. She didn't change the form of the question.
Mr. Klingler, what's the background on you wanting to do Joe and Tanya a favor by calling law enforcement? How does she get to ask the
what a
question?
garbage cross.
I'm going to allow that question.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes.
Well,
Nailed
they
it,
had
Ryan.
called law enforcement many times without any sort of relief. And
Approach.
What a garbage cross. I think the trick would be don't ask any questions, hope that they forget about it. But all you did in your cross is draw more attention to the worst facts that this witness was elicited from.
Yep.
Oh my God.
I keep thinking, why are you calling another witness? But each witness that comes on is good.
They've been great.
In retrospect, now I look. Oh, now I see why I called the witness.
Yeah,
they're rock solid, and they said that the 3 in a row said this guy's a psycho, and I can tell you when he was alive, he did crazy stuff.
Let me ask a more pointed question. Just to be clear, what
Oh my God,
you
the
just indicated,
prosecution actually
you
won
were
an
talking
objection.
about the Chavez is calling law
I
enforcement.
gotta
numerous
figure that out.
times.
yes,
These are
And-
long days. I wanted to do one tonight, but I'm not sure.
Was it your understanding that they were calling law enforcement about Mr. Areola?
yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Cooley, you need to step down, okay? You be careful with that step.
These have been awesome witnesses for the defense.
So that was the guy that was on his way, I assume. It makes sense. They wanted to get him in first. It's short before you put the expert on because it'll take a while.
So I don't think that I think this was a separate incident, which somebody was asking why I would get it excluded. Because I think that this was a separate prior incident.
Yeah, we're back to that. I still think the realtor might have had something going with him. That's for sure. I don't know that. I'm just saying that I got that vibe from her getting so emotional on the stand about it.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, my name is Aaron Brudenell. I can spell that. It's 2 A's, R-O-N, and Brudenell is B-R-U-D-E-N-E-L-L.
And sir, where are you employed?
I'm currently employed full-time with the Arizona Department of Public Safety in the crime laboratory in Tucson.
And
Okay,
how long
this
have
is
you
the
been employed
Reconstruction
with
guy.
the Arizona Department of Public Safety?
Since 2007.
And what do you do for the Arizona?
This might be their
Department of
last
Public
witness.
Safety?
I'm a firearm and tool mark expert.
What are tool marks?
Tool marks essentially are any usually microscopic marks left behind when a tool interacts with some other object. For example, in the firearm context, the tools used to manufacture a firearm typically leave very unique and identifiable marks behind on the firearm, and then subsequently those marks get transferred to fired ammunition. So that type of examination is the type of work a firearm examiner usually does.
And do you have any degrees?
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry and a master's degree in analytical chemistry, which is more focused on the analysis of chemical substances.
Oh, if he was the one that
Do
tested
you
the
have
freaking
any
residue.
other educational background?
I do.
God, I hope.
My firearm and toolmark education, my forensic education for what I do, came from the ATF's National Firearm Examiner Academy. It's a year-long course of study that started in 1999. I was in the second class,
sounds better than the
approximately a dozen
self-directed
students go through a year-long course of study covering all topics in firearm forensics.
internet classes that the prosecution had.
Oh, ATF is the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. They were formerly part of the Treasury Department. Now they're part of the Justice Department.
All right, and you indicated that you have a master's degree in analytical chemistry.
Yes.
And when you were obtaining your master's degree, were you a graduate research assistant?
Yes, I was.
And what areas did you study or conduct research in when you were a grad student?
The research I worked on was essentially ion molecule interactions. Like
Wait,
mass
you mean he has a
spectrometers.
degree?
It's very technical, but the simplest application are when you see the screening devices at the airport where they might run a swab across your luggage or your hand, put into a piece of equipment to analyze for trace substances such as explosives. That's the type of research I was focused on.
And after you obtained your master's degree, where did you first go to work?
My first job in forensics was with the Idaho State Police. I was hired in their crime laboratory in Pocatello, Idaho, where I started training and did casework as a toxicologist.
And your casework as a toxicologist.
Better living through
what
modern
did that
chemistry.
entail?
First one to tell me
Largely
whose motto that
analysis
was.
of urine
wins the prize.
samples and also testimony. Excuse me, let me back up. Largely the analysis of urine samples for substances, controlled substances, and other impairing substances and their metabolites. But additionally, I did work with breath alcohol analysis. So that's the type of alcohol analysis that's usually done either in the field or in, say, a police station for testing a person's breath for the level of alcohol intoxication.
And you mentioned that you would also testify in your scope of work.
Yes, I've testified in both those areas before.
And were you testifying as an expert in those areas?
Yes, I was.
And did that work include drugs such as cocaine?
Yes, cocaine is one of the common drugs and its metabolites that we would see.
Nobody's got it yet.
Routinely in urine samples, for example.
And alcohol?
There you go, April.
Yes,
you got it.
alcohol as well.
It's DuPont's.
After the Idaho State Police, where did you go?
Once I was at the Idaho State Police, I got my training in firearms and worked cases there. I worked briefly for the Washington State Patrol after that, about a year and a half. And then I moved to Arizona, where I worked for the Tucson Police Department in their crime laboratory in the firearm and tool mark section.
How long were you at the Tucson Police Department?
About 3.5 years.
And you said you worked in their firearm and tool mark department?
Yes, I did some brief drug chemistry while I was there, but for the most part, I was focused on firearm and tool mark forensics.
And when you're doing firearm and tool mark forensics, what does that entail?
Luna Freya,
most common
my
firearm
bar
cases are
licenses are
receiving
readily
evidence
available
and
online.
examining it for operability, seeing if the
So,
safety features function.
go F yourself.
Seeing if it's safe to fire. The next, probably more common and less and more complicated analysis would be looking at those test fires under a microscope and then comparing them to evidence that may have been recovered from a scene, such as a fired bullet or a fired cartridge case.
Did your work with the Tucson Police Department include reconstruction of shootings?
To a limited degree, I did reconstruction of shooting incidents at Tucson Police Department, but I would say the bulk of my reconstruction work happened once I moved to my current position at the state.
And did your work at the Tucson Police Department include processing of crime scenes?
Not at that department. I did some crime scene work in the Idaho State Police.
And did you ever testify?
Yeah, the
when
Better
they were
Living
at the
Through
Tucson Police
Chemistry
Department?
was
Yes, I
part
did.
of
And in
an
what areas were you
advertising
testifying?
campaign. And I'm going to
Almost all
talk
of my
over these
testimony
people
was in
because
the
I don't care
firearm and
about the
tool mark work or
qualifications.
Reconstruction.
And was that as an expert?
Yes, that's correct.
But yeah, Better
And
Living
then where
Through
did you move
Chemistry
after
was
Tucson
part
Police
of
Department?
a
Currently
rehabilitation
where I
campaign
currently am in
after
the Arizona
DuPont
Department
was
of
found
Public Safety.
to,
Same city, just a different
uh,
agency, statewide agency in a different
well,
laboratory.
wasn't found
And
to,
when
but
did you
was
start
the
with
one
Arizona,
that was supposed to
Department
be
of
the one
Public
that created
Safety?
Agent Orange.
2007.
So in like
And what do you do for the
1982.
Arizona Department of Public Safety? If you could kind of walk us through your career there.
Sure, and it's essentially stayed the same since I started. I work on routine firearm and tool mark cases and do shooting incident reconstruction casework as well. Anything having to do with firearm forensics or a shooting incident, that's what I'm tasked to.
Do you also assist in training employees?
Paula, you
Yes, I
got
do
that
as
one
part of my job.
perfectly.
We train sometimes new employees on basic firearm safety and handling, all the way to having so a new firearm examiner, if they were hired, I might participate in their training as well.
And have you testified as an expert during your time at the Arizona Department of Public Safety?
Yes, many times.
And what areas do you testify as an expert in?
Firearm.
I'm not arguing with them. I'm just telling them to
shooting
fuck
incident
off.
reconstruction.
Do you know how many times you've testified as an expert in those areas?
I do not. We routinely have our testimony reviewed once a year. So I would say, with only one exception I can recall, I've testified every year that I've worked there, and usually more often than just once.
Which courts have you testified in as an expert?
I've testified in criminal courts in Idaho, in Washington State, in Arizona, Illinois, Kansas, Colorado, and here in New Mexico. I believe that's the full list. I've also testified in federal courts in some of those jurisdictions too.
And have you ever conducted any trainings or taught any classes?
Yes, on a number of occasions I've taught shooting incident reconstruction, for example, and other related coursework. I've done it for different organizations from time to time. National Institute of Justice, West Virginia University, the Arizona Department, the Arizona Homicide Investigators Association. Those are some of the more common ones.
Are you also an instructor for the ATF?
Yes, the academy where I attended in 2000, 2001 brought me back as an instructor in 2004.
Have you taught classes on trajectory?
Yes, I've done that type of casework, or classwork in classes involving shooting reconstruction, and I did a specific online class for a group called RTI, which is a research organization and training organization in North Carolina. It was called the 4 Elements of Trajectory, so it focused on specifically the trajectory aspects of shooting reconstruction.
Have you taught classes regarding firearm evidence for prosecutors?
I have tried, at least. I've done this course that I called Firearm Evidence for Investigators, Attorneys, et cetera, and some prosecutors have participated in that. In one course in particular that was for the Pima County Attorney's Office, we did a firearm forensic specific course.
Have you written any articles or books that have been published?
I have written some articles.
I don't mind the
published, and I've
trolls.
also
Sometimes I
participated
bait
as a
them just
co-author
because it's
doing
fun.
research for some
It
other
really
organizations.
doesn't actually bother
And
me.
in what areas have you been published?
Gunshot residue. I'm kind of blanking on some of the others, but the gunshot residue aspects are the most common in my field in terms of stuff that I've published or participated in publishing.
Have you published or participated in articles regarding flash suppressors?
Yes, I did an article that was published in it was a magazine as well as a forensic journal that focused on the relationship between flash hider design and also barrel length and how those interacted.
Have you received specialized or advanced training in any areas?
Yes, a variety. My CV usually lists all of the individual trainings I've received, going into either forensic meetings or specific training I've gotten from specific organizations as well.
And some of that advanced training, would that be in firearm and tool marks?
I would say most of it is either firearm tool mark analysis or related fields such as shooting reconstruction, or in some cases other types of pattern analysis.
And advanced training in crime scene analysis?
Yes, I've had some of that as well.
And some advanced training in chemistry?
Yes, I believe so.
And advanced training in toxicology?
It's been a few years, but yes, I've had some training in toxicology as well.
This is a
And
defense
have you toured
expert,
any
April.
firearm facilities?
He's I believe, a
Yes,
crime
part
scene
of my
reconstruction
initial
expert.
training and continuing on as the opportunities present themselves, I will
And
take
maybe
advantage
their
of
last
opportunities
witness.
to tour either firearm or ammunition manufacturing facilities.
And why do you tour those facilities?
A number of reasons. The firearm facilities are useful for seeing the process of how guns are manufactured, because we use the manufacturing marks in part to do our job of identifying individual fired bullets and cartridge cases to specific firearms.
Yes, skeptical chemist.
Seeing
I
the
think that
process
he
and how
is
they're
more than
manufactured is useful.
qualified.
For example, most firearms have a serial number, but it may surprise you to learn that the gun that has the second serial number to the first gun may not have been made at the same time. They make parts in batches, and then the guns are assembled from the parts that are made. So you could have two guns that have the same, or
Generally, no.
similar serial numbers that were made some time apart. That's just one example. Ammunition factories are probably equally useful, but for different reasons.
You would need to
Seeing
have
how
something
the
particularly
manufacturers,
egregious, and I just don't think
use
that's here.
the raw materials and assemble them into complete ammunition. Occasionally,
Yes,
marks
this
may
is
be
the
left
best shot in the
behind that you
interwebs,
wouldn't want to
Kathy.
confuse for marks that could be used to link a fired cartridge or bullet to a gun. Also, the different manufacturing the different manufacturing technologies, and also the different manufacturing processes will show you things that might help you identify the brand of an ammunition or some other important aspect of something that may have been recovered at a shooting incident.
I wouldn't necessarily say the most qualified, but regionally,
recall,
yeah, this guy
the
certainly
numbers
has
in,
better
I would say, in the
qualifications than
Would that include
Officer
SIG
douchebag.
Arms?
I did tour a SIG Arms facility, I believe in 2000, and it was the facility in Exeter, New Hampshire.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense would tender Mr. Brudenell as an expert in firearm examination and shooting reconstruction.
Oh, they're going to make the state's expert
toxicology.
look like an absolute moron. He might actually succeed.
Well, that's trial.
I think they're fighting over whether he's qualified himself on the toxicology question. Because I don't know if I necessarily heard enough voir dire to do that. By the way, how do you pronounce voir dire?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Like you.
Okay.
All right, so to be clear then, Mr. Brudenell is qualified as an expert in firearm and tool mark and shooting reconstruction. Okay, thank you, sir. Mr.
Honestly,
Brudenell,
lost on the toxicology one, so we might have another
have you been
witness
provided with
tomorrow.
any information regarding this case that we're here for today?
Yes.
We don't need
a
any of
number
this.
of documents,
No, but
photographs,
It'll probably be helpful, but we don't need it.
recordings of interviews and transcripts, things of that nature.
And did you review those materials?
I did.
And what was your purpose in reviewing those materials?
That's how I roll, Greg.
Essentially to do what I could to evaluate the evidence available to me in the context of the incident.
And in reviewing,
You know what? It
that
is a murder
evidence,
trial. You want to do the belt and
did you
suspenders
make
just
note
to
of
cover
any-
your bases.
Any items or any investigation that was missing that could have been useful?
There are a number of things that can go into a shooting reconstruction, and if I can pause briefly to elaborate.
Please.
When you do a traditional forensic examination where you offer a firearm or an unknown substance to a crime lab, the analysis is fairly simple and straightforward. It may be technically difficult, but it's a straightforward answer that you get at the end of that process. The firearm may be determined to be operable or inoperable, and that'll be listed on a report. the substance may be identified. This is a controlled substance and it's cocaine, or this is a non-controlled substance or something of that nature. But a forensic reconstruction is very
I don't
different
really have a
from
lot of
interpreting.
control over
And what
that.
that means is a forensic reconstruction
I did.
usually involves
I turned you down a little
assembling
bit.
as much information and data as you can,
Just now.
both from, say, a crime scene and from forensic analysis that happens at the laboratory. And the way I like to describe your result at the end of that process is you have a filter. You have a series of facts and information you can use to sort out different scenarios to try to decide if one scenario under those circumstances that you've identified is
He's boiling
possible
cauldron
or, say,
underneath.
impossible, or if one of those scenarios is more likely, say, than another. And so when you're done with a forensic reconstruction, hopefully you have a better picture of what happened, but you will almost never have a perfect picture of what happened. You may have some information that will help you sort out certain facts, say the sequence.
What sort of Tinder-esque activity is going on here?
It's very difficult to be sure. A perfect reconstruction would involve a number of things, including trajectory analysis and measurements.
So in this case, when you reviewed the evidence, this is the evidence that was gathered by Sandoval County Sheriff's Office and the New Mexico State Police. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
And have you ever reviewed cases that involved either of those agencies before?
I would say a number of times I have, yes.
And so are you familiar with the work of those agencies?
Somewhat, yes.
And in reviewing the work that was conducted in this case, were there certain areas that you felt there could have been more follow-up done?
I think there are always going to be other things that could have been done, additional work. And if you're doing the reconstruction, you're trying to answer the questions that are posed to you. But specifically in this case, there were a number of bullet impacts inside the structure and some traveling outside of the structure. Those bullet impacts were photographed and they were labeled, very important parts of the process. In some cases, trajectory rods were placed to indicate the bullet paths as they went through certain structures. But what wasn't done were specific photographs or measurements that would allow you to document the exact trajectories more accurately. And there wasn't, that I saw, a evaluation of the whole scene that included information on bullet trajectories that may be incomplete. For example, a bullet striking the floor at a shallow angle. Some other information that might be useful is to try to determine if that bullet struck that flooring and ricocheted, or if it went through the flooring and entered some space underneath the house. Those are the types of information that I would have liked to have seen if possible, and possibly some other information on specific materials, such as what the flooring was made of exactly.
Why would that be helpful to know what the flooring was made of?
In some cases, you will see different effects depending such on, for example, the thickness of, say, flooring material or what it's constructed from. In this case, I have a pretty good idea what the flooring is made from, but how thick it is, or other information of what might be below it was lacking.
And you had mentioned
the world is not
impact
ready for
sites,
that.
the different impact sites at the scene.
Yes.
Is there testing that could be done on those impact sites that help you to, I guess, sort of construct that filter that you had mentioned?
Yes, and I was able to do some of that testing.
And what other types of testing is there? Is there like some kind of chemical testing that could be conducted?
There's two things in particular. Some chemical testing may be useful. The residues of gunshots that are fired at close distances to objects often leave residues that are, if not visible, can be made visible through chemistry. There's also other things that can be observed, such as physical impacts. Sometimes the residues from a shot that's fired at close range are visible. Sometimes they're not visible, but can be made visible with oblique lighting or other techniques that enhance, say, the magnification of the surface you're looking at. Either a very close photograph taken with a macro lens, or in some cases even a photograph taken with some form of magnification so you can see individual particle impacts on the surface.
And why would individual particle impacts on the surface be important?
What that can give you in some cases is a better estimate of the distance, and in maybe some other cases, the angle at which a shot was fired. Essentially, when a gun is fired, the bullet leaves the barrel at a high speed, but following that bullet out of the barrel are a number of residues, including unburned particles of powder, that are also leaving at approximately the same speed. Now, a bullet does not slow down very fast cutting through air, but small, lightweight particles of powder do. So once you get a certain distance away, those particles of powder will disperse in their area and also lose velocity so they don't produce the same kind of impacts. For example, you might be very close to an object and have lots of visible residues. You might be a little farther away and have impacts from these particles that leave small, visible or barely visible damage to that surface. And once you get farther away, sometimes all you have are the particles themselves adhering to the surface. And some of these things can be seen easily. Some of them will take some techniques to visualize. But in any case, that kind of information may help you get an idea for a particular impact, how close or far the gun was. And in some cases, even what was the orientation of the firearm in space at the moment that particular shot was fired.
And there's been
This is a
some
guy that's an
discussion in this
actual
case
expert.
regarding gunshot residue analysis. What is that?
Please notice the
Well, there's a
difference.
couple types. The initial
In terms of
term
quality of
gunshot
information.
residue is probably very broad. We use it in forensic contexts usually in two ways. One way would be to identify, say, the distance a shot may have been fired from an object, as I just described. There is another technique that's trace gunshot residue. That's how I describe it. It's looking for particles of residue that are not visible to the human eye on, say, skin or clothing to identify if a person was in the vicinity of a gunshot or participated as a shooter, for example.
And is gunshot residue analysis something that a crime lab can do?
Yes, mostly the former type. The latter type of that trace residue is only done by a few specific laboratories, and it has limited probative value depending on the circumstances of an incident. The other type is more commonly performed in most modern crime laboratories.
Yes.
And
yeah,
when you have a gunshot victim who's wearing
I'll say
clothing,
few
and you're
experts.
trying to determine
Probably
the
all
distance of the firearm from that
the
person
conflict.
when they were shot, does the gunshot residue analysis assist in that?
It can, and normally what happens in those circumstances are the clothing itself is delivered as evidence to the crime laboratory, and that item of
And remember,
evidence is
they did
analyzed
not
by the
do that
laboratory
here.
for that purpose.
And do you know if the New Mexico Department of Public Safety has the ability to do this type of analysis?
They do.
What about ejection pattern analysis? What is that?
Ejection pattern analysis takes advantage of looking at the way cartridge cases are ejected
Mike,
from a
your
firearm.
audio is breaking up a little bit.
Typically the distance and the direction they travel. If I hold a firearm and I'm pointing in a certain direction, in more cases than not, the cartridge cases that are fired, if they're ejected from the firearm in a semi-automatic gun, for example,
You knew we
they
would
come
get
out of the
here.
gun, they typically go right into the rear
Cummings case.
slightly, but that's a rough estimate. Every gun and ammunition combination can be a little different. So the value of analyzing the ejection pattern would be to see
after this guy, it's
the
a great time
distance
to
and
rest.
maybe the direction of cartridge cases and how they travel through air and where they land.
No, I'm not.
And does the ejection pattern analysis have some limitations?
It does. For one thing, it's a pattern, so
think
you're
they
not
need somebody
gonna
to come
put
in
too
for
much weight on
talks
any
or no?
individual data point. You
I'm
may
thinking
have
My mic is
12
on.
cartridge cases that all land in a pile and one or two others that go
According to this.
far and wide. That can happen.
I can hear you.
Also, the limitations would include you'd have to have some information or knowledge or understanding of where the firearm was held and at what position. Because if I'm standing and aiming level, the cartridge ejection pattern may be very different than if I'm, say, sitting down and holding the gun at a 45-degree angle.
Yeah, that's
Those are
been
things
my
that can
experience.
affect it. Orientation can also affect it. If I have a gun, such as a rifle, and it's typically ejecting to the right, if I suddenly turn it sideways, it's going to start ejecting upward, for example. So those sorts of things can have an impact.
And when you're, oh, I'm sorry.
Apologies. The last thing I think that is significant is the environment. And what I mean by that is the simplest example is if you were firing a gun and the cartridge cases are landing, say, on a grassy field, they will typically land once and not bounce and stay right where they first hit. If, on the other hand, you're standing on a sidewalk or an asphalt or some rigid structure, those cartridge cases will typically hit and then bounce, and they may go a different direction and vary after that point. Lastly, if you're in a confined space, cartridge cases can hit objects in the confined space, hit walls, they tend to bounce around. So the utility of doing this type of work starts to become limited in those conditions.
And while we're talking about casings, as part of your shooting reconstruction, do you look at where casings are found?
Yes, I do take note of that.
Yes,
and if
yes, they do
there's
get
some
a copy
information
of
to
the
be gleaned
report
from that,
beforehand. They don't
oftentimes
necessarily
I'll
know
try
what
to
he's going to
incorporate that in
testify
my
to, but they
analysis.
get a copy of the
And
report that he's
the
basing his
location of
testimony on.
casings, can that also have limitations?
Yes,
And what would those limitations be?
very much the same. We're talking about the same process. If I find casings all in one spot, that's useful if it's an open air shooting scene. On the other hand, if they're in a confined space like a car or a small room, the location of those casings, or at least a specific location within that room, may be of limited value because those casings, like I said, can hit and they can bounce. It would really depend on the specifics of the circumstance. And what I have found is, unless the question is, was the person in the room or out of the room, confined spaces are usually limited to just that type of answer.
And you mentioned that you had reviewed the evidence in this case. Is that correct?
Yes, I reviewed what I was provided.
And do you recall what you were provided?
I don't have the full list committed to memory, but again, as I said, a large number of photographs,
Howdy.
Some transcripts, and some other information of that type, specifically the lab report from the New Mexico State Crime Laboratory and the conclusions within that as well.
And did you happen to see if there was any testing done of a firearm by the Department of Public Safety in this case?
Yes, there was.
And what kind of testing was done?
Kind of what I described, routine test firing and operability testing was done. I'm remembering mostly the SIG rifle because that's the gun I focused on. Also, the ammunition itself, the fired cartridge cases that were provided, or that were recovered, excuse me, were compared, and they were also identified to that particular rifle.
Did you conduct any testing in this case?
Yes, I did.
What kind of testing did you do?
What I took note of were the visible scorch patterns seen on the floor of the location on two of the shots in particular. And I tried to find a way to reproduce those patterns and see what it would tell me about a possible firearm location and orientation. So
And- Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. So I did a series of test firings with a similar gun and similar ammunition on samples of flooring material to see if I could reproduce those patterns.
And did you prepare anything to aid the jury in understanding your testing?
Yes, I prepared sort of a series of essentially PowerPoint slides, individual pages that can be reviewed to show how that process took place and what the results were.
Your Honor, at this point in time, we would ask to be able to publish the slides as demonstrative aids to assist the jury in understanding Mr. Brudenell's testing.
What, do you got an expert here?
An actual expert, yes.
Yes. Who's doing well so far. Haven't gotten any substance, but he actually seems to be an expert.
Are you going to use your laptop there, or is it the document?
And hi,
use
everyone.
the document
Thank you
camera
for all
right now.
the salutations.
So the defendant actually took the stand earlier. I don't know if you saw that, Ben.
No, I didn't. How'd he do?
He did awesome. It shocked me, but he did
I don't
awesome.
see a visual here, so I'm not sure.
Wow.
He did absolutely great.
Sure.
I think he just closed.
This is an NG all day long.
Really?
Yeah.
If everyone can see that, I'll begin. This is the firearm and the ammunition from the
Train wreck
incident.
pattern was my
The rifle
Monday morning
below,
today.
I think we've seen
Anyway.
it earlier today. It's a SIG model 5.56 rifle. It's very similar to an AR-15 in some respects. It's also different in others. This particular firearm has a 16-inch barrel based on my analysis of the image and similar products.
Hola,
The
Maria.
ammunition is
Todo
photographed
bien?
above.
Todo bien, Maria?
The green tip ammunition is a common U.S. military type of ammunition, and it's got a specific bullet weight and usually a head stamp, which is the markings on the back of the cartridge. You can see in the circular image below.
That's
to the
about
left,
right.
excuse me.
That's
And
that's
that
about
is
my experience.
LC19. LC stands for Lake City. That's the name of
Hey,
the
Kurt.
arsenal that makes the ammunition.
Good to see you, Kurt.
And 19 usually refers to the year of manufacture. So that's what you're seeing in this image. I did not have access to this particular firearm or an identical model, and the ammunition I could find was similar, but it was from a different date. So my test equipment that I used for generating test fires will be shown in the next image. again, the same type of ammunition and also a head stamp that has just a date that's 5 years prior. So LC14. The rifle is an AR-15 rifle with a 16-inch barrel. And more specifically for both firearms, we look at the next slide. The muzzle device on the front of the barrel. This is the device called a flash hider. It's typically designed to reduce the amount of visible flash that's seen when a gun of this type is shot. And both the firearm from the shooting incident and the one I used for testing had a flash hider that has slits only on the upper half of the actual device.
And so to be clear, in this slide that we're looking at, where did you get this photo, the top photo from?
The top photo is a
and
photo
the
of
people
the
who
firearm that was
prosecution
recovered in this incident. Is shown in, I think, in the box that it was packaged in, and that's just a close-up of that muzzle.
Uh-oh, people is learning something.
And this photo?
That's one I took at the range in preparation for my test firing.
And the fact that you're not using the exact gun and the exact ammunition, like how does that play into the results?
Well, I would say it adds some extra unknown, and in particular, were I to get a pattern that I felt represented the pattern that I saw, I would only treat that as an approximation. I would not assert with any kind of certainty the exact muzzle to target distance. That's the kind of thing that you would want to have a more precise combination of exact similarities from your testing and the original incident. But for the purposes of this, it was easy to see in the basic format a firearm and how the various patterns change as the angles change, and get a rough approximation of where this firearm would have been at the time those two particular shots were fired.
And so why are we focusing on the flash hider that was in the last?
The reason the flash hider is important is that because those vents are only on the top half of that circular flash hider, that means that the vents that are going to release those residues that are visible at very close distances are only going to be.
Mike, I think Kurt's here.
So, for example, if I was shooting underneath a windowsill, a very low top of a windowsill, I would expect to see those flash patterns there. I wouldn't expect to see them if I was on the bottom edge of a windowsill shooting out of a window, because those flash patterns would be directed upward. In this case, the patterns that were seen on the flooring in the shooting incident scene,
I think
had
Kurt's
those
here.
patterns on
Thank
it.
you.
What that told me was that rifle
No,
was
no, no.
Definitely didn't hear you the first time.
upside down. At some point, the
That's
gun
all right.
was
We
held
lose him
in the
sometimes.
opposite orientation that a normal shooter would hold it.
Sorry, we were
The
learning
grip
things.
facing down and the magazine
For the first
down,
time today.
ports upward. In this case,
Yeah, Mike was learning something. That's why you got distracted.
I would like to actually show you the firearm.
You got distracted by a competent witness.
God forbid.
I miss skit time. Can we bring back skit time? Oh, good. We might bring back skit time. Yay. Maybe he could do a reenactment with the prosecutor.
loaded gun safe.
Well,
Did
you
like
should
him
know.
firing the gun
You're
after
the
he
expert,
pointed at the
remember?
prosecutor?
Is it a little gun? He asked. I mean, you're the
Visually
expert.
see the chamber is
At
empty.
least he
There's nothing
decided to
inside
check
gun,
the weapon.
either the chamber or the magazine area, so this gun has no ammunition in it, so it should be perfectly safe to handle.
Okay. And so this firearm, is this the firearm that you were looking at in the photos?
Oh my
Yes, it
God, we
is.
had somebody that actually
Okay. And
checked
when you're
the
talking
weapon
about the flash
properly.
hider, can you please show us what you're talking about?
Yes, right here is the flash hider device, and it may be difficult to see from a distance, but the area on the bottom where the grip and the magazine are is solid. There are no holes on this portion of the flash hider, but on the sides and the top are where those ports exist. The intention of this, I think, initially is to keep the blast going upward rather than going downward. But as a practical effect, if it's fired close to an object that records those those patterns, you can get some indication of the orientation of the firearm in space. And so when I say that the firearm was inverted or upside down, I would approximate using this as a stand-in for the floor. It was in some sort of orientation approximating angles of this type. So upside down and at some angle this direction, shallow angle. Furthermore, it may have been tilted slightly one way or the other, but for the most part, it was in an upside down orientation at the time those shots were fired.
And is that a typical way to fire a rifle?
Not really.
Should we move on to your next slide?
Sure.
Okay.
You know,
So
in
these are the
fairness,
two images that
I'm
were
comfortable with
taken
him
by
carrying
investigators at the scene. You can't read the label below, but it's items I-11 and I-12. Those are the impacts that are recorded and described in this photograph. You see the kind of gray-black pattern surrounding those impacts. There is a close pattern which has sort of just a parabolic shape to it. But then farther away are the individual little patterns that correspond to those open ports on the flash hider. If you look at I-12, which is the lower one, you can see 3 of them. And if you look at I-11, you can see 2. What I found interesting was also that the distance between the actual impact site, the damage physically done to the floor, and where that cone of residues appears, they kind of just overlap. Right about the time the bullet impact starts is right about the time that that larger pattern starts to dissipate.
Should we move on to the next one?
Yes, please.
So now we had talked about your testing that you had done in this case. Does this show some of your testing?
Yes, it does. So to approximate this on the range, I got samples of similar type of flooring material, and I set them up using a vise and another apparatus with some clamps to put them in at a specific angle. Now, as I said, the images from the scene show the gun being held upside down, but it's very impractical to do that in a range, and this was a much easier way to reproduce angles and patterns. So for example, this particular image that you see on the left shows a side view where you can see the ports in the upper half of the muzzle device, and the structure that's being fired at is at approximately a 45-degree angle, where I could actually use a scale below or direct measurements to see how far away that.
Oh my
flash
God,
hider
he
was
actually
from
did
the surface of the
testing.
wood.
What?
The other image is just a view from behind, approximately where the shooter would be standing, observing how this testing was done. I think the next slide's more useful. So this shows 4 of those test samples, and the one that was the first one done would be in the upper right, and that was at 45 degrees and at a distance about 3 inches. And so that's essentially what had more or less in the photograph you saw before. And at that distance and at that angle, I was not able to visualize any of those muzzle patterns. So none of that dark, sooty shapes that showed the location or the distance. There were other visible patterns, and they might be something you can see in there. There's small light specks around the area of the bullet impact.
And you can touch the screen and pop actually.
That's that sort of zone where those individual particle impacts are striking the surface of the wood and producing slight damage. These can be visible in photography, but may not be visible in all cases. So at 3 inches, this thing was close enough to still do some tiny microscopic damage to the surface that could be evaluated for the purposes of distance. The other samples, when compared, I felt that the one at the bottom left, the contact shot where the muzzle is actually in contact with the surface and the angle is 20 degrees, most approximated the residues I saw. So you have that pattern that, as I said, the dark pattern that starts to dissipate at the spot where the bullet hole starts. So right in here, you have the pattern dissipating, and you also have the bullet impact starting there. And then you have the individual, in this case, 4 visible patterns of the actual residues themselves. This one up above has 3 that I can see. Apologize for that. This one also has several.
Talk over him,
but what you'll notice with this one and with this one, the location of that sort of central residue pattern isn't at the same relative location. Now, I wouldn't feel comfortable ruling out these other 2 possibilities based on the differences that we described. The firearm is a different firearm with some different properties, and the ammunition is slightly different based on a difference of 5 years of manufacture. So I wouldn't swear that any of these are absolutely accurate as far as determining the distance, But as you can see, for the most part, you have to be fairly close in my test set, under 3 inches, and contact being fairly reliable. And you have to have the firearm in an orientation where those ports are producing marks, individual marks, that show that the gun was essentially upside down at the time.
And this is probably going to be explained by the attorney. But if you notice, this is entirely consistent with the idea that
So
he
to
had
try
the
to
weapon
reproduce these
pointed down and was
specific
trying to
samples,
grab walk backward
I
out
used
of
a firearm,
the
the same
altercation.
firearm, in an orientation in a contact position.
Oh, good Lord, no.
Oh dear.
You just got a buffering situation here?
Apparently. But you all, you're all following me. What I'm saying, like, if he was saying that he was knocked down multiple times and was trying to basically crab walk backward out of the situation and started firing, that would be consistent.
Since
with
joining forward and utilizing
Oh dear,
tips
what are
that
we
I got
watching
from my
now?
doctor, I've dropped my cholesterol.
And so to try to reproduce these specific samples, I used a firearm, the same firearm, in an orientation in a contact
Since
position.
joining this trial, I've lost my will to live. Is that similar?
Oh, come on.
Anyone remember when we had competent trials with 2 attorneys and 2 sides with competent witnesses, and we learned
Those were the
things?
days.
I just did this. All right. It's not coming back. I'll try this again.
And Kurt, it's been a long time since I've had a trial with 2 competent attorneys on either side.
So to try to reproduce
You're
these
always rolling
specific
the dice.
samples, I used a firearm, the same firearm, in an orientation in a contact position.
You ready for the next slide?
Yes, I am. Thank you. And again, this is just close-up photographs of those 2 test shots that you just saw after they were produced with a scale and showing the direction of the shot travel. And these, like I said, approximate what was seen at those 2 shots, impact 11 and 12, at the scene. Next.
I don't know what an ISP is, but thanks.
Internet service provider.
Ah, there we go.
What are we looking at here?
So this is a view from, I believe, a Google Earth or Google Map of the site, or in this case, no, I correct myself. I believe that's an aerial view that was taken by investigators at the scene.
It looks like a model some
area,
kid
the
made with
highlighted
mesh
area, the red
sticks and
zones, the
popsicle
rectangles,
sticks.
show the locations of where the impacts were recorded inside and on their way out of the structure. And so I wanted to try to roughly diagram those based on the photographs that were offered. And the next slide should show the diagram. So in this case, I was focused on the trajectory rods that were made visible by investigators. They place a rod into a bullet path that tries to approximate the location and the angles and the directionality of that particular shot.
It's
There
the
were
aerial
3
of
going
aerial is
through
area.
the interior door between the mudroom and the hallway. Those are the ones in the center circle in green. And there were also 3 that went through the exterior wall and I believe a heating or some other unit that was in its path. So the individual photographs you can see to the right and above in this diagram image. Now the trajectory rods were placed, giving sort of a rough estimate of where the shots passed through and at what approximate angles. They weren't measured though, at least not that I could tell. And the photographs weren't of particular angles that were useful for taking measurements, because sometimes you can take measurements directly off a photo if the photograph is done in a precise way. The other thing that is lacking, and it may not have been determinable, is whether or not those 3 shots going through the door are also the same 3 shots that went through the wall. Bullets can travel through a number of structures. The next images show the actual impacts through the door itself. And it's a bit of a close-up showing the shots as they are going into the door from the inside, heading outwards. And in this case, if you look, you can see that the holes through the actual door itself, those holes are not round. The holes indicate sort of an oval shape. And what that tells me is at the moment these shots all struck this door, they were likely destabilized by one of two possibilities. Either something in the relationship with a firearm that's not properly stabilizing the bullets, such as the incorrect twist of rifling or something like that, some defect, or these bullets may have struck some other surface on their way. These might be continuations of other impacts that hit the hallway and then ricocheted off the flooring. At this point, I can't say either way.
The bullets are tumbling.
What are we looking at here?
So this is a view of that hallway. And what I'll point out, and we'll see, I think I have a better view of it as well, but there's another shot here. The three shots that we just saw going through the doorway are all through here. And you can't see them in this image because they're blocked by the door wall. But the one through the actual corner itself that you can see has a trajectory rod through it. And there are additional impacts that are marked and labeled on the floor. You can see several of them here. And those shots were identified and marked and individually photographed. My next process was to look at those individual photographs. Since I couldn't see any residues, I wanted to see if the shape of the bullet impact gave me any information on directionality. Now, there's two types of directionality measurements you can get for most bullet paths. There's what we call elevation angle, which just means how upward or downward is that bullet path relative to gravity. And the second thing is what we would call an azimuth or a horizontal or a bird's eye view, which is what you would see if you were looking straight down. And that was what I was more focused on. That angle, that visual top-down view would give an indication of which direction through the structure these bullets were flying. And if
Guys,
they were
I
hitting
think
at
part
a
of the
shallow
issue
angle,
is I'm
I
not
could see
sure that they actually gave
if they were hitting
a
at a steeper
weapon
angle, they
over
would
to
be
the
more
defense
difficult to
to
determine
test.
because that shot would not, it'd be closer to a round hole rather than a linear hole that would point in the direction of bullet travel.
And why is that important in this case?
Well, in this case, I think there was some question about whether or not there was a struggle. And one of the things that I thought lent itself to a struggle, besides the orientation of a firearm leaving those residue patterns we already discussed, would be a very shallow impact. You know, somebody firing a gun very low to the ground. Unless you're lying prone in a deliberate fashion, that might also be indicative of shots fired during a struggle while the gun is being forced away from somebody and held low.
Are we done with this slide?
Yes.
What are we looking at here?
So this is inside that room, looking at slightly different angle. This shows additional impacts. These are the ones we've already discussed, 11 and 12. Here's some other impacts here. I don't believe these are impacts. I believe these are blood marks. I don't recall specifically. But also showing the location in that room where these individual impacts were. And as you'll start to see, once I look at the diagram, these impacts were going in this direction. Both 11, 12, and the one next to it, which is I think was number 10, but it's in my diagram if we go to the next slide, I believe.
Before we move to your next slide, though,
Please.
the location of impact sites 10, 11, and 12, was that interesting to you, or does that say anything to you?
Yes. It's easier to see when you get the whole diagram, but the bulk of the trajectories were at least going this direction down the hallway, but these were running in a very different direction. These were more or less parallel. Yeah, that's probably good. The red arrows are indicating what my finger is doing a mediocre
This
job
is
of drawing.
demonstrating that the guy was cornered.
The red
in that
arrows show the indications of where these individual impacts were and what their angles were relative to a bird's eye view. So we have multiple trajectory angles illustrated here. What's almost as interesting are these impacts.
Well, the
that
defense has
I
been
can't
fine.
make that determination because they were fired at a steeper angle.
demonstrating that the defendant.
And
was
again,
cornered
if
in
the
room.
firearm is fired downward at a steeper angle, that may also be indicative of some kind of struggle for the gun because there's not a reason to do that short of maybe a warning shot or something of that nature or an accident.
And what about impact 14?
14 parallels going down the hallway. That's at a slightly different angle than the ones that appeared to be going through the door and also exiting the structure with the purple trajectory rods in some of the previous slides. But other than that, I can't comment more than just that kind of angle.
So how many different directions do we have bullets flying at this scene?
I would say there are, it's unknown at this point. There are at least, if you want to simplify and keep 14, 9, and these 8 with the arrow all together with the group that are going through the door and the group that are going out the side of the wall, all those could be roughly described as a direction that way. But there's going to be some variation. But this group, this cluster, all appears to be going 90 degrees from them. And in particular, other impacts without that kind of directionality that I could determine from photographs could be in a totally different direction if for no other reason they're not being fired at a shallow angle to make ricochet or slight shallow impacts on the floor. They would be fired at a different angle, so something steeper. So once you consider 3 dimensions, I would say we have at least 3 likely sets of trajectory angles that these fired bullet impacts would fall into.
And when you have these 3 different angles, what does
And
that
it's all
tell you
entirely
about
consistent with what the
scene?
defendant himself.
What that tells me is it supports the likelihood of a struggle for the firearm, because a deliberate attempt to shoot at those angles doesn't really make any sense. If people are fighting over a gun and it's going off in the process, that would help go a long way to explain different trajectory angles and also different vertical angles and even different orientations where the gun's upside down and in contact with the floor. That's a very unusual angle, and I felt that was the most compelling.
Okay, and we're talking about those impact sites with the scorch marks that you tried to replicate in your testing.
That's correct.
Okay. I mean, is that something you see a lot in shooting reconstruction?
I would say not often, and we do see things like that. Sometimes you just see a muzzle blast. The firearm would have to have a muzzle device of that type, and then the muzzle device of that type would have to be in a location during the shooting event where it could produce it. But I have seen that before in some instances. Before we move on, the other 3 trajectory aspects I wanted to focus on were the ones through the body, through the decedent. There were 2 wounds to the decedent, one to the head and then one to the chest. Both were described by the medical examiner as top to bottom, right to left. So if you're seeing me passing through me in this direction, as well as in the diagram, but no front or backward orientation. So these projectiles were essentially slicing straight through at this type of angle. That's an unusual angle. If someone were shot while they were standing below a shooter, that would make sense. But in this case, given the likelihood of a shooter being in a position that's on or near the ground, that body would have to be pivoted in such a way at the waist that it is point oriented mostly in that level. So bent at the waist, pointed, if not forward, slightly to the left of the shooter's position if both of those were produced at the same instant. Now, I can't sequence these shots. I can't say that the 2 shots through the body or the 3rd shot I've described, which is a gray shot we'll show you in a moment. I can't say those were fired simultaneously or all at the same time. But that seems to be the most likely scenario.
It's
based on the location where the
consistent
body
if he was
fell
shot while he was
and
lunging
found.
at
I think it's unlikely those
the
shots would have been
defendant.
delivered after that incident.
And you were in the courtroom when Mr. Cummings was testifying today, is that correct?
Yes, I was.
And you heard his description of what happened that day.
I did.
And would you agree that what he's describing as this altercation where he's on the floor doing this crab crawl back, and as he's trying to stand up, objection leading,
I'll allow a little bit.
and as he's, thank you, Your Honor, and as he's standing up, he starts to shoot as Mr. Areola is coming at him. Would that be consistent with what you see here?
It could be, yes. I think the next image shows the graze that I was describing.
So what are we looking at here?
So this is the decedent in the position where he was found and located after the incident. As I said, there's 2 wound paths that go through the body that approximate this angle.
That was never in
There's also
dispute.
a shot that grazes the clothing and did not produce
I don't
a
know if
wound,
that's a joke.
but it also parallels those 2 trajectories, which is to say it's skimming across the back through the clothing at the same angle and at the surface of the actual garment itself where it wouldn't produce a wound. So I regarded all three of those as parallel trajectories relative to the body, even though only two of them produced injuries.
Next slide.
Please, yeah. One other thing I noted was the front scope cover was missing. It had been pulled off and also broken. There's two parts to it. You can see there's the lid that flips up and down, and there's also the circular rubber section that goes directly on the scope and holds that in place. Having this thing separated could also have been done during a struggle, because someone grappling for the gun could easily get a hold of that part and turn it or pull it and separate it from the gun and break it into two pieces.
And did you see any evidence that there was electrical tape that had actually been used to secure the scope to the cap to the scope?
Yes, there appeared to be, when the firearm was photographed upon recovery, it had some tape that was around the scope itself. And that's usually done to build up the circular surface area that the scope cover is attaching to. The tighter the fit, the more likely it is to stay intact during use. So one last thing, these are photographs of the defendant's hands, specifically on this hand, which is the left hand. There are two sort of dark, I would call them scorch marks or dark residues. They could be from a number of sources, but one of the things I have seen before and experienced personally is if a firearm is being held in an orientation or a location where the residues are coming out of the gun at that spot, you can occasionally get those residues deposited on your hand. I'll use this gun as an example. If I was holding the firearm in a normal orientation for firing, I would be gripping the pistol grip with my right hand, and the left hand would be underneath this part here. Residues, though, may be coming out of the gun, not just at the muzzle, but also at the ejection port, possibly through these vents up top or below, and also through this area here. I didn't have the opportunity to test this ammunition in this firearm to see at what point those residues could come, but to the extent that those residues...
Why not? You've only had 2.5 years.
...could be produced from areas of the gun that aren't normally held by the shooter. Finding residues on a hand could be indicative of the gun being held at an unusual position or an unusual location at the moment the gun was fired, or at a moment the gun was fired.
Kurt, I'm not entirely certain that they gave the defense an opportunity to have their own expert examine the weapon.
But this is the state's expert. This is the state's expert. He's the guy who works at the crime lab.
No, he's not. This is the defense expert.
No, the defense called him, but he works for the government.
This photo here, this is one of the photos that was in evidence. Is that correct?
Yes, that's a photo of the exterior, this location, but on the outside.
And what do these trajectory rods, what do they tell you about the direction or the orientation of the bullets?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
this is just one photo. There are other photos that do show the interior and show other elements of the path. So, for example,
you might be right.
If I have a shot fired,
works for the Arizona Crime Lab.
I can connect those two dots.
I stand corrected.
Form a line. That'll give me a
I apologize.
Of the bullet's path through those.
So because the weapon was still sealed,
there were other structures inside the structure here that you.
I don't think that they gave them access to
the individual rods are meant.
I thought Arizona and
New
Mexico were the same state.
Of the bullets that made the bullet holes.
No, strangely enough, they're not
through. And in this case, you can see one is very close to the floor, because the floor is essentially
even each get
here.
2 senators,
and these other two are slightly higher and diverge slightly. Now, I can't give accurate measurements because I don't have photos that will allow me to measure directly. And as far as I know, direct measurements were not obtained. But what this does tells me are these are low shots that are either slightly ascending, which could be indicative of a ricochet, or from a low position firing out. And then this lower one here, again, same thing. Could have hit something on the way in at a low angle and just be traveling low, or maybe on a ricochet upward.
Rob, I swear to God, that's not going to be even close enough to.
Now, Mr. Brudenell,
pay my bills.
There's been testimony in this case
Thanks,
regarding the distance of the gunshot wounds, or the distance of the gun to the gunshot wounds.
Yes.
Are you familiar with that testimony?
I'm not sure. If it was something I heard today, I'm remembering only what I've reviewed in the medical examiner's documentation.
Okay, so you reviewed the medical investigator's report?
Correct.
Okay. And the doctor testified last week that the shot to the head was at an intermediate range.
Yes.
What does that mean to you as a forensic scientist specializing in shooting reconstruction?
To me, and generally speaking, I think throughout the field, intermediate means it was close enough to see residues. So residues from the shot being fired, some of the residues we discussed today, but not close enough that it was in contact. A wound, especially to skin, at a contact distance produces some very characteristic damage to the tissue that separates it from a shot fired from a distance. An intermediate means it was close enough to leave some residues, but not close enough to actually be in contact. The other aspect of this was the absence of residues identified on the wound to the body, but that location was covered with clothing. So the residues that may have been present could have been on the clothing and intercepted by that.
So the fact that there wasn't gunshot residue located on the body,
Yes, Claude.
can you make
cannot-
an accurate determination regarding distance without more analysis?
You may not be able to make an accurate determination of distance, and you would do it with either shot separately probably, but I would say that it is possible that both shots could have been from a similar distance, not to the wounds themselves, but to the body in general, which is to say,
Claude,
if
generally,
I'm bent
yes.
forward facing somebody.
You cannot lead witness, even if it's an expert, but you're given a little bit of room, depending on how you phrase your questions in most courts that I've been involved in.
Because at that angle, those individual surfaces are different distances away.
And specifically regarding the gunshot to the chest, that would be a scenario where gunshot residue analysis might be helpful?
It could be helpful in
I think
either
it's
case.
too late for me to apply for the New Mexico
can't
bar,
speak
take over
to
for the
every,
prosecution, and try
combination
to
of
make this a more
investigators and
salvageable
labs and
case.
agencies. But traditionally,
There's no
wounds
salvaging
to the
this
skin are
case.
evaluated by the medical examiner for distance. They may use forensic scientists at the crime lab for
investigation's
test-fire
been done
generation
2
or
years
other
ago.
resources. Shots to clothing are often delivered directly to the laboratory for analysis by them. So it really depends on the surface that struck and the organizations involved in the investigation and the forensic analysis.
And being as how you work in a crime lab, you work with law enforcement. In your experience, who typically is responsible for determining what type of forensic testing to do?
In most cases, the either investigator involved in the initial investigation would make.
This is why they kept this guy in
essentially
reserve.
issue or give to the laboratory with the evidence what they call a laboratory request. So they're requesting the analysis.
They're
they
going to
want
recall
done.
Officer Stupid.
They may or may not want DNA or fingerprints collected from an item. They may want it tested, such as a gun, for operability. They know the case better usually than anyone at the lab because the lab is a service organization.
Yeah.
In some cases, depending on the
Unless they go into a
type of
coma,
case,
forget
those-
everything.
If it's going to trial, those requests may also come
Oh, no,
from
it's
the
a
prosecuting
perfect
attorneys, for
presentation.
example. And in some cases, even defense attorneys will weigh in with a request for analysis.
They
Now,
get
Mr.
him
Bruno,
in,
do you still have the firearm
and then
up
they
there?
recall
Yes, I do.
Officer
Could you
Stupid,
take a closer look at it, please?
and then they rest. It's a perfect idea.
Can you look on that firearm and see if there's any sort of dried residue or spatter?
Yes, and it's difficult to visualize, but what I'm seeing here are a number of, I would call them essentially gray spots, small, tiny spots, and in some cases, slightly larger ones on the opposite side. They look almost like water spots look on, say, a dark surface if the water evaporates and you see a little bit of the calcium residue behind.
Is that blood?
It doesn't look like blood to me. In the initial photographs that I saw, it appeared fresher and more wet, and I thought there was a possibility it could be blood. But at this point, I wouldn't guess that it's blood based on visualizing.
Could it be gun oil?
I guess it could be, and I can't be certain that it's not blood without some testing. I don't really know what it is.
Could it be mace?
Possibly.
Yeah, like I said, Kurt,
So
they didn't
without
give him the
further
actual
testing, it's hard
weapons
to be certain what it
analyze.
is.
That's correct.
And are you aware if there are any
Kind of not.
laboratories that
Why
can
would
do
you want to give the
testing to
defense
determine if something
opportunity
has
to
been sprayed
examine
with
the
mace?
evidence against them?
My understanding is there are
I
a
don't
number of
know. I thought
laboratories
Brady
that
was
could
the
do
thing,
that.
but, you
It's
know.
not a common analysis that you see in most
Brady,
routine
what's
crime
that?
laboratories, but there are specialty laboratories that do all sorts of chemical analysis, so I suspect it could be done.
Now, Mr. Brudenell, given your review of all of the evidence, do you have any opinions about whether there could have been a struggle that occurred at the time of the shooting?
Individual aspects of what I've reviewed point that direction. The damaged and removed scope covers, the varied trajectory angles, and also the fact that the majority of the trajectory impacts I've seen appear to have a shallow impact. The fact that these residue patterns indicate the firearm was upside down and in contact or likely close contact with the flooring when it was fired for 2 of those shots. All of this independently suggests a struggle. I can't think of a more likely scenario to describe that combination of events.
Thank you. Thank you. We passed the witness.
Oh, this cross is going to be an absolute disaster.
All right.
I might need to do a walk around the block. Because I guarantee you they're going to screw this up further.
So did we?
How's that possible?
Well, Kurt, were you here? Ben was actually working here, but were you there when they got in that the victim maced?
Oh yeah,
a dog.
I wasn't here. I was over with Andrew Branco on Law Self-Defense, but I've been watching this all day.
Oh.
I watched Skit Story Hour.
The skit.
I watched them open not just the door but the damn wall. That was good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, clearing the gun after he had pointed at the prosecutor was top notch. That was top notch.
And then we got the stick of truth. Let's give him a stick of truth instead. Stick that tells no lies.
I'm literally I'm literally reaching the stage where you've broken me, Mike. Seriously. People are like, oh, what are you gonna do? And I woke up this morning and I was like, all right, let's do this case. And then maybe I'll run something because we have a murder case in Hillsborough County that started today. And I don't think I have it in me.
Yeah. Well, I didn't think anything would happen today, but we kick it off by them calling the defendant to the stand. I thought you are insane. You've already won this case.
The state every time the state speaks, it just gets worse.
Yes.
But the defendant came in great.
But the defendant came in great. So I was sitting there telling them they're the stupidest people who ever lived, but I didn't know how well he'd hold up, and he didn't have any prior convictions to eat on the stand. So
yeah, I did have some criticisms for the defense and their calling the defendant. I thought there were some weaknesses in their presentation, but I don't know that's worth even going over at this point because the state's weaknesses are so far, so many, and so vast that like, who cares?
Well, that's the problem with these prosecutors, and I don't understand it because, yeah, you're right. There were some weaknesses in the narrative that could have been attacked, but they didn't.
They didn't.
No.
They did quite the opposite.
Very effectively, quite the opposite. They didn't have anything to confront them on.
They brought in the parade of people who got maced, and then ultimately the guy whose car got hammered and the dog got maced. At first, I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of petty, but when you establish that pattern, and then the prosecution keeps confirming it on cross.
Yeah,
I thought.
And what Andrew pointed out, which I don't know if you guys have noticed, is like they don't have transcripts for anything. They don't have transcripts for the call. They apparently just got a transcript from a reporter that they didn't bother to check to see if it was complete in any way, and they didn't depose any of these witnesses. They're doing the Darrell Brook thing. They're saying, hey, in a police report that says this, you said this. but they don't have sworn testimony, so they can't impeach him on that. So it's all crap. They didn't depose any of these people.
Nope.
And then they complain about the fact that they didn't have the
got really
opportunity to depose the defendant. That was a nice moment.
Oh,
They
that
got
was
really
something.
goddamn close to a Fifth Amendment violation when they tried to bring up in front of the jury the fact that they did not depose the defendants.
Yeah, we should be allowed to. We haven't had the opportunity to ask him any questions before.
That was a really dumb legal argument in my mind.
It showed that at least I will say this, it showed that the prosecutor appreciated how bad that was when they offered a jury instruction on it. Yeah. Which I'm not saying that to insult them. That shows, I acknowledge I stepped in it. Can we do a jury instruction, Judge?
Yeah, and you know what? That was fair, and they did walk it back a little bit.
And the defense said nah, which makes sense to me. It does. But it shows that they at least knew it was wrong.
They put themselves in mistrial territory.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't understand why they didn't depose any of these people, because for these police reports, all the witness has to say is, no, I never said that. And they have nothing to cross-examine. They can't impeach them.
But here's the thing, Kurt. And
why did they depose them?
I don't know if you were watching at the time, but they were pointing out the fact that they didn't depose the defendant.
No, I mentioned that part too.
Yeah.
I mentioned that part too. That was also dumb.
Like, that is the problem that I'm pointing out here.
No, I appreciate that. I moved back to my previous topic. I'm
You're
sorry.
identifying a Fifth Amendment violation in front of the jury.
Yes. Yeah. That was also a problem.
I don't know what.
In short, today was a lot more interesting and exciting than I anticipated. I kind of expected the defense to just not put on a case because they didn't need to.
Yeah.
And while I think they've improved their position, I'm not sure that it was worth the risk. It went well, but I'm just saying it only because it went well.
Yes.
If you had a prosecutor come back and sting you on cross on a couple of these things, you'd be kicking yourself saying, why did we call anybody?
Yes and no. And the only reason why I say that.
Oh yeah, Rob, they did.
Yeah, they did.
That's what we're telling you.
Good.
Well, it's both.
It's a little bit of both, and I think that's why Corey made a really good point when I had him on. I'm tired of people telling me to just breathe. All right? Like, I'm not going to have a friggin' aneurysm on stream.
I might.
In any event.
I'm going to have a cocktail.
I think you've been having a couple of them.
I made it about a half hour into this afternoon stream, and then I said, no, we're going to the White Claw. That's it.
But here's the thing where I'm coming from, is the prosecution keeps making it worse for themselves.
They sure do.
And at every step of the entire process, because one, would I have called the defendant? No, not necessarily. But clearly the defendant was well prepped, knew his shit, was on top of things, was able to respond to cross-examination very effectively. So, okay, if I can get somebody in my office and does that, do I roll the dice? I don't know. But the way that he performed, I think, was perfectly fine and actually made my case.
Oh, I think he did great.
Now, on the flip side, if I'm the prosecution, do I prep for potentially the defendant testifying? God freaking yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know that he will, but I'm sure as shit going to be prepared for the possibility that he will. And by the way, not for nothing.
Runkle's backstage. Law.
Runkle's here.
Mike, pay attention. There you go.
Ian!
Hey, how many of those White Claws have you had?
Well, I'm about 3 in, but you got summoned Oh my God. I wish I had the clip for you. I mean, I have it, but it's, I'm midstream here. They, what's going on? Is that me?
No, it sounds like my audio is leaking.
Yeah, it's not me.
Okay.
All right, let me
So
fix that.
they have an expert on right now that's excellent, but the prosecutor cross-examined the defendant with the gun, which is a SIG, hands him the gun.
Wait, what?
Reenacts the event, the crime, but whatever, the incident. Okay. He points the gun at her. The bailiff comes out and says, "Whoa, wait a second. We should really check that and clear it. Make sure there's nothing in there." I'm not kidding you.
What?
After he had it trained on the prosecutor for about 30 seconds.
Yeah, that was at like 12:30
It's
this morning my
insanity.
time.
Wow.
The prosecutor gave the rifle to the defendant, said, "Can you point it right at me?" Great.
I mean, first of all, that kind of demonstrative is itself inherently problematic.
Yes.
It was more as a farce than prejudicial, though.
Yeah.
It was not prejudicial to the defense. It was just stupid.
Wow, that's exceptional.
I wouldn't have objected to it.
And not only that, the bailiff, to his credit, he was like, "Wait, let me take a look at it." Like they were at a barbecue. Like before.
The thing is if I had employees at a firm and I found out that one of them had pointed a gun at somebody in court or handed a gun to any witness and asked them to point it at a person, that person would be coming back to their office to find their stuff in a box.
Absolutely.
And it would just be like, sorry, you're done. You can't be trusted to run a file. You can't be trusted to handle a firearm. You can't be trusted to not potentially cause huge problems. So, basic firearms safety is one of those things that should be part of, you want to do criminal law, you have got to get this down.
Yeah.
Because there's just,
and thank you, Pat. If I'm going to find the clip later, but I did, and I forgot about this. It's on my thumbnail. You've got the defendant pointing a SIG at the prosecutor mid-trial on my thumbnail from this morning.
I'm gonna have to go back and watch that just because that is
it's pretty stupid.
Not for nothing. On top of that, Officer Stupid decided to point it at the prosecution, the jury, and the judge when he was handling the weapon.
Mm-hmm.
I have run out of fucks on that one, and when people point a gun at me, in court, I'm gonna just start arresting people because there is no justification for it, and here in Canada it's illegal. It's happened to me several times. It's always been a cop, always. But yeah, I'm just.
That's why I
am. Yeah, I don't have any patience for that.
They had a little skit. Yeah, Kathy's right. It went on for a very lengthy period of time. They held a whole reenactment. The defendant was on the floor in the well of the court, playing with the gun, with the actual gun, mind you, rolling around with it and shit.
And it
was a
farce.
farce.
Funny. So then my chat blows up. We need to get Ian in here. And I said, "Oh, Ian and I already discussed this from the prior witness screwing up at 5:00 in the morning on Saturday while he was raising $50,000 for Children's Hospital."
Yeah, my sleep schedule is a little screwed up. I mean, it's always a little screwed up.
I don't even know how you're
but I was
conscious
like,
right now, honestly.
Well, mostly through determination. But
and speaking of which, it's currently at 51,891. So anyone who wants to punch it over the top of it, 52,000, you can go donate to Ian at Extra Life for the Children's Miracle Network of Hospitals.
The real magic happens at a certain point because so there's these corporate accounts that are fundraising, and I'm not griping that they're corporate accounts and they're fundraising or that they're pouring money into their accounts to beat me out. I think that's fantastic. Like, absolutely kick my butt on this. But the thing is that they will keep donating, like pouring money in to make sure that they're in the top 5. That's what they're doing. It's the marketing sort of aspect of things.
Mm-hmm.
And
So what that means is that if people donate and push me above them, then they're going to end up donating again to push that over. And
it's sort of
so
like a de facto double down.
It's exactly, they're effectively donation matching. So what I'm
So there
hoping
you
is that I
go.
can make them do that again. So because
All
yeah,
right.
if I can push them to have to donate again to stay in the top 5, then we can basically match everyone's donations.
All right, so then keep pushing it, guys.
So yeah, if I can manipulate corporate marketing for the children, that's all the better.
Yeah,
It's for a
absolutely.
good cause.
And Ben and Runkle, you guys both also missed. They got the defense actually got a witness to discuss how the victim or whatever the alleged victim maced a dog.
Yep.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
What?
Based upon
They asked the
an
witness,
opening
"Hey,
of
you
the
never
door
saw him
by
mace anyone before?" Nope.
Inept cross.
Yeah, I saw him mace him. I have it on tape. He maced my dog.
Ooh, really?
From a perfectly credible witness. Oh, it was a nightmare for
And
the
that was state's
prosecution.
witness?
Yeah.
No,
that
that's
was
the defense
that
witness.
was the defense's witness. And
They,
just
they
being
brought in
stupid.
like 3 different people that this guy maced.
Wow.
Good
Plus his
afternoon,
dog.
sir.
Good afternoon.
Too bad the DA doesn't have investigators.
I have some questions for you.
Certainly.
I'm sure this will be good.
So we did 2
How
pre-trial
do they make
interviews,
this
correct?
worse?
That's correct.
Yes, via I think Zoom or something of that nature. It was a video conference.
Yes, it was a video conference, and I believe they were a couple weeks apart. I recall.
Yeah. Yes, sir. So the first time that I interviewed you was October 6th, 2022, correct?
I don't recall the exact date, but that sounds about right. to
About
me.
a month ago. And when I interviewed you, I asked you what discovery you had reviewed. And at that point, you had reviewed the OMI report,
So, yes,
photographs,
yes,
and some police reports.
I believe so. Yes.
Okay, but you had not reviewed all of the discovery yet at that point, correct?
Yes, and I would say I rarely get the opportunity to review everything. For one, it takes a tremendous amount of time, and also it's hard for me to look at every single item of documentation.
time
and
is
know what
probably
the value
very
is without
expensive.
starting through it all.
And you
damn,
did
this
not write a
must
report
have
of
been
any kind in
expensive.
this case, is that correct?
Well, that is correct.
Now, when I interviewed you on October 6th, you told me that you had 2 opinions. The first being that the evidence supports a struggle for the gun, which is what you testified today, correct?
Correct.
And the second opinion that you had formed was that Mr. Adiola was shot from a low position, likely from the corner of a room. Is that correct?
That's what it appeared to me at the time. Yes.
Okay. Now, we also talked about trajectory and scene reconstruction and that it's more of a what's more likely or less likely based on what the evidence says. Is that right?
Yes, and as I said, we try to find ways to compare scenarios and have reasons to rule one in or rule one out, or have reasons to describe one as more or less likely.
Okay. And I think that the best scenario, the way you put it, at least in your interview, was that this isn't like the Scooby-Doo show where you finally figure out what happened and in what sequence.
That's correct. You don't get to the end of the story and a full
Scooby,
telling of exactly what
Where
happened.
are you?
Okay. And obviously you weren't there that day.
I hope you're well.
And so you don't know, you're reading the evidence, if you will.
That's correct.
Okay. And only Mr. Adiola and Mr. Cummings know exactly what happened that day.
That's probably a fair statement. In fact, I would even say that participants in an event often don't get the full picture because an intense event like a shooting or a fight can affect a person's perception and memory. So as a general rule, I do use testimonial evidence when it's available and I find it useful, but more often than not, I try to focus only on the physical evidence because that's stuff that can be tested and evaluated, hopefully impartially.
Okay, so let's talk about your opinion that there was a struggle, okay?
Yes.
In a firearm like the one that we have here in this case, I don't know if you have it up there with you.
Yes, it's right here.
How is a round chambered in a rifle like this?
In a rifle of this type, there's usually we call a charging handle, some kind of operating control on the outside of the gun.
Can you stand up and show the jury what you're talking about?
Yes. In this case, the operating control is right here. It it has sort of a shape to conform to a person's finger, for example. So to charge this gun, if you had a magazine seated in the magazine well, you would pull this to the rear and then release it.
Okay, and then a round would be in the chamber then.
Yes, if everything's functioning properly, a round would be taken from the magazine and put into the chamber for preparation for firing. If there was something in the chamber at that moment, when the action is pulled open, what's in the chamber was typically
I hate this tactic.
So if I had a round in the chamber and a magazine seated,
This
in front
annoys
of
the
it,
hell out of me.
you would find a live cartridge coming out of the gun.
Because this
and
is
then
a guns
another
are
live one
scary
coming
argument.
in.
This is akin to
So
the golden rule.
what you just described, having to pull
prohibition.
the pin back, I think you called it.
Charging
Pin, yes. Thank you, sir. I'm not good with these
That's okay.
terminologies. That's an affirmative action that would add time to somebody who wants to shoot that rifle. Is that correct?
Wait, are they bringing
It's a
race into
process
this?
that requires an action. That action requires some amount of time.
Okay. So let's talk about the scene. I'm sure you've reviewed all of the photographs.
I believe.
Okay. So you told me that one of your opinions is that the struggle occurred in the bedroom and possibly the hallway. Do you remember that?
I believe so, yes.
So I'm going to put what's been admitted as State's Exhibit 45 under the
Yeah,
document.
this is bullshit argument.
Yes.
Zoom out, sorry.
I can see it.
Okay. So were there any projectiles documented in this wall behind
This
the
has
weapon?
nothing to do with law and
Or
fact.
any impacts, I'm sorry.
I don't recall seeing any. Having not visited the scene, there's no way to know if there were impacts there that weren't documented. But I didn't see any documentation of impacts there.
Okay. And actually, let's use the photo from your demonstrative. I think that would be easier. And this is page 9.
Yes,
Okay. So that would be this wall, correct?
correct. I'll mark it here.
Okay. And as far as you know, there is no impact documented to that wall.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. And there was no impact documented to this wall, is that correct?
Also correct.
Was there any impact documented to this wall?
There was a single impact in the wall at the very low area, which was basically the door jamb. The door is not accurately represented here, but it's approximately in that location. So there was one shot that was to the door jamb, which would be sort of the part of the hallway just adjacent to the doorway.
Right here?
Lorna,
Yes,
he was
approximately there.
crab walking back, trying to get up multiple times.
Yes. Well, you can't see it here. It was in a different photograph. Essentially,
You're
go back to
destroying
that
your own
for a
case.
moment. It would be in this area right approximately here, slightly above the view of that photograph. Oh, there it is. You can see it.
Me.
Okay.
I'll clear
But that's
this.
not in the bedroom, correct?
No, leading out.
Okay. So there were no impacts documented on this wall then, is that correct?
I believe so. Well, none that I saw.
Okay. So we can agree there's no impacts on this wall,
Correct?
this wall,
Correct?
or this wall.
Correct.
So can we assume that the gun was not fired in any of those directions?
Directionality is tricky because there are two directions. There's the top-down view that we're talking about here, but there's also a downward angle view.
Okay.
And so I can't be certain if there weren't impacts, one, that weren't recorded, or two, impacts that might have been going in those directions that were at an angle such that the bullet didn't
Roger
actually make it
Agnew,
to the
that's
wall.
literally
Bullet
definition
striking
of
the floor, for
semi-automatic.
example, or for that matter, one that went into the ceiling if it wasn't observed. Those wouldn't make it to the wall either.
You also had testified on direct examination about some of the best practices in doing scene reconstruction and trajectory and things like that. You said that trajectory analysis would be one of the best practices. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that's a fair statement. I don't usually use the phrase best practices, and maybe I did in this case, but it's one of the things that can be done, and there are certain
That
ways
nervous
to do
giggle.
it. In some cases, there's no need to do it. In a case like this, I felt it useful.
Okay, and I apologize. You said perfect scenario.
Fair
not
enough.
best practices. Okay.
I used that
Ah.
term before. I
Red
just-
versus blue.
Just to be clear, you said perfect scenario. So you also said that in the perfect scenario, you would have measurements.
Correct.
And when I interviewed you, you stated that measurements weren't important in this case. Is that correct?
I don't remember the exact contents if I made that statement, but I would say for the purposes of evaluating whether or not there was a struggle, I felt I had enough information to draw that conclusion from a variety of facts. I think what would have been more interesting or useful would be to do connections of some of these trajectories. It would be nice to know if it's possible that the 3 shots exiting the structure could have been continuations, say, of the 3 shots through the door.
Mhm.
That could have been done with measurements, possibly, could have also
Right.
been done in other ways.
And I think that the questions I asked you when we had done the interview was, did you measure the gun? Did you measure the room? And things of that nature. And you said that those types of measurements were not important, correct?
To the best of my knowledge, they wouldn't be. And I say that only in the context that without other measurements to tie them to, I can't make use of sort of half of an equation.
Okay. So you testified on direct examination about the broken cap gun. And I'll just use your photos since
So why is she asking about all the things she personally interviewed him about?
Because she wants to impeach him, but she didn't
Not
bother to
working.
depose him, so she doesn't have sworn testimony, so she can't impeach him because she's lazy.
Ah, and also she's running the risk of becoming a witness.
Yes, very much so.
No, I never said that in our interview. Well, yes, you
Yep.
did. Okay, great. You're a witness. Get off the case. Like,
this is page 16
don't
on your
go there.
monster. And you have it circled on your little photo there.
Yes.
That is an actual risk that she is running.
You testified that this may be indicative of a struggle, correct?
Correct.
And in your interview, you told me that these types of things aren't super
No,
robust.
stop.
Do you remember that?
I may, yeah, that sounds like the way I would have put it. If I can elaborate, this scope cover, the part that goes around the scope, is of a flexible rubber that's designed to stretch and fit over the front of the scope.
Okay. And you said that this is something that can be easily broken if you are carrying the gun and you bang into something.
Those are possibilities too, yes.
What if it wasn't actually attached to the gun, but it was taped with electrical tape? Would it be easier to follow?
Objections. Calls for speculation.
If it was actually
By
taped,
definition.
I would think it would depend on whether easy or harder is difficult to evaluate without a fit.
Absolutely.
Tape might actually make it easier if it was taped on the outside. Typically, the tape would be used on the inside to sort of expand the diameter so it fits tighter. Kind of like putting a thicker sock on your foot before putting a shoe on, making a tighter fit.
Is it typical to use electrical tape to put on a cap?
I've seen it done in the past. I would say more often than not, if you have access to a variety of sizes, you get the one that fits the best.
Does anyone disagree that this is
Oftentimes,
not
you have
abject
what's available, and
desperation?
to make it fit, you might do that.
And in scenarios, if we're talking, I don't know how to reset this. Do you have the reset button there?
Oh, yes, I do.
You don't know though whether or not this cap was actually there before the homicide or not, correct? That's not something you can say.
That's true.
Okay. Now, let's
People,
talk
I
about the
actually
other
want
impacts.
the right answer to come out of trials.
Would you agree that
Waiting
the
for
other
the answer,
impacts
that's
that were
like-
documented on scene were low impact
Because
I asked the question doesn't mean I should have to wait for
and
an
an
answer,
upward
Ian.
trajectory?
A number of them were, and specifically the ones that exited the structure with the 3 trajectory rods that you can see in the photograph on the outside. I can't be absolutely certain about the upward trajectory without a really good perspective photo or without measurements, but looking at the combination of them and multiple photos, that's what it appeared to be.
And I'm putting it underneath the document camera, States Exhibit 68. This is a photograph of the bedroom, correct?
Yes.
Where would the shooter likely have been
Masadi, absolutely right.
when Mr. Adiola was shot?
I guess I would say there are 2 possibilities. that makes sense to me. The one that initially seemed the most logical would be a shooter somewhere in this vicinity, based on the fact that the trajectories would more or less correspond to their locations and their path through the body as it fell.
It is the Cummings case.
Assumptions based into that would be that all those shots that struck, the two shots that struck the decedent, hit him at the same time, and he was incapacitated immediately thereafter.
I think the investigators
It is
modified the
possible
crime
that
scene.
either of those assumptions are not correct. The third shot across grazing the back also corroborates those orientations. The other theory that does fit, that I think, would be a shooter in this position and descriptions of the body turning slightly as the shots are fired. If in fact the torso was facing the shooter and then moments before the shot was fired, turned slightly.
And are you saying on the bed or in front of the bed?
This is the part that I have no really good way to assign it. If, two people standing, one bent forward and charging, could have produced those shots, or one person sitting or crouching on or just below the bed, or in front of the bed, in a position where the other person is on hands and knees moving towards them, for example. Those are two possibilities. The standing and the height, that I wouldn't be able to resolve from any of this.
Would you say then that based on your review of the evidence that the shooter was at an elevated position from the decedent?
It is a possibility. What I would say is the orientation of the firearm at those moments, those 2 or 3 shots were fired, is consistent with being parallel to the torso. Now, whether that means two people are, one person is at a position, or the gun is at a position at this level, and the body of the decedent is tilted exactly level with it, or that there's a slight variation, the body's tilted most of the way down, and the firearm is at a slightly elevated position, is possible as well.
Okay, let's talk about the position of the body during the shooting. I think that was your second opinion we had talked about in your interview.
I think I missed the first half of your question. Please.
Let's talk about the body of the decedent
Yes.
since we're talking about this now. This was a 3-shot grouping in the bedroom?
Well, there were 3 shots, 2 that struck the body and 1 that grazed the clothing, that are all more or less parallel.
And they were right to left?
Correct. Right to left and downward.
Trajectory.
And
Okay.
that's based on an anatomical position of a person standing straight up.
And can the trajectory of a bullet change inside the body as it hits
No,
different
that would be
organs or
impossible.
different
It can.
matter within the body? Can the trajectory change?
It can, depending on a number of factors, the type of projectile, the speed, and the objects in the body that strikes. My evaluation of that analysis is based strictly on what was reported in the medical
Oh,
examiner. So the
I
medical
almost-
examiner presumably follows the entire trajectory and describes it as a linear path.
I almost went thruple there.
Presumably, if a shot was fired and they hit a rib and changed direction, they would hopefully be able to describe that as well.
Now, Mr. Adiola, is it possible that
Yes.
he was on all fours in a crawling position based on the shots to his body?
I believe that is possible as well.
Is it possible that Mr. Adiola was bent over, leaning forward?
Yes.
And the shooter, based on this position, must have been over or at a higher elevation or than the decedent was, shooting downward.
Is that not
It's a
also
possibility,
consistent
and,
with a lunging
one that I think
position?
is maybe almost absurd.
That's my
to me.
redirect,
The
and I'm
shooter
done.
was at the top bunk, firing downward. I would still expect the torso of the decedent, the moment the shots were fired, to have been bent forward slightly, at least to correspond to that angle.
I think this was a hypothetical we talked about, right?
Right, I believe so.
Where potentially the shooter's on the top bunk bed.
Now, if
fires
all the
one
facts
shot
were
and
the
then
way I'd want them
down
to
and
be,
fires
he'd be
two
guilty,
more,
right?
correct?
The problem with that, and I don't want to say it's
Right.
impossible, is that it requires those.
Yeah.
Are all
shots
of
to
these
also
things
be
possible?
That-
Sure.
that's what she's down to. You are correct.
It's not impossible, but it's probably not the most likely scenario.
Is it possible that the
Prosecution
shooter
burden
could
is to
be
prove that it's possible,
standing
right?
on that twin size bed
No.
shooting down?
There is a possibility, yes.
Anything is possible. Some things are probable.
But no measurements
is
of
what is.
Mr. Cummings or Mr. Audiola were used in any of your analysis, correct?
Correct, and there were no measurements available that I'm aware of, except
Okay.
possibly the body height measurement from the medical exam.
Just from OMI, correct? They
Correct,
typically
correct.
take those
They
from the
routinely
decedent.
measure the body position and also the position of the wounds relative to height.
Nailed it, Jennifer.
So let's talk
Yeah, that's
about
basically what they're trying to do. And they've been trying to do that from the beginning because they have
Past
garbage
the
facts.
door. I'm looking at page 10.
I don't see how we're clearing a civil standard, let alone criminal.
Yes.
Now the
This is
impact
bullshit.
We're not.
door and that
We're, yeah.
and then exiting
Yeah,
that,
we're
that was-
nowhere near.
Was that likely a 3-round burst?
I wouldn't describe a 3-round burst because that implies something mechanical about the.
What are you talking about? A
Shots
3-run
fired.
burst?
She doesn't know.
and that would
She's
require
heard the term
the
3-round
single shot
burst,
passing through
and
the
she's
door
counting
jamb
3 rounds, but she's not actually
correspond to one of
done
these
things like
impacts,
checking
and
if
for all
this
3
gun
of
is
these
capable
impacts
of
to
burst fire
correspond to the
or
Which it's so-
understand
which
what
is
burst
Pretty sure
fire
it's
is.
not.
It's a reasonable hypothesis.
It's not.
that happened. And without seeing the scene
What
and
the-
or doing measurements, it would be difficult.
She doesn't know what she's
verify. It might
doing.
even be
That's the
impossible.
problem we've got here.
Okay, because I think that there was also an air conditioner that.
This is
those
a special
shots
level of
traveled through,
stupid.
correct?
Yes, the interior
This
that I didn't
is-
have photographed here, but did see.
Be aware that
photographs of
guns exist
inside
before
of
you
this
run a
wall
gun file.
had
And
an air
if you
conditioner, some
can't,
device, some
if you're not
mechanical
sort of
operation
familiar, at least
or
be able to
apparatus,
check Wikipedia.
in the path of some of those bullets.
Vote Kurt Mueller for prosecutor. My opponent
I
is
have
an idiot.
never
regards
run
to
a
the
gun file
hallway
in my
impact.
entire life. I've never run a criminal file, and I know
I'm
the
talking
stupid
about-
damn question.
Page 14. Here.
Because you
Now,
know what? When I was a kid, I played Call of
could
Duty.
I
And then you're more qualified than she is right now.
That must mean you're a mass murderer.
of the projectile?
Um,
Like
Oh
ricochets?
God, this is
There's a
awful.
possibility that some, and I'll even go so far as to include 9, some of these could potentially relate to those other trajectories. It's difficult to be certain with the information available, and it may not be determined if we had all the time in the world and all the resources to investigate the scene. But one of the possibilities would be those shots traveling together, ricocheting off the floor, and then proceeding off as a departure angle to produce those other impacts. That's a possibility.
Would you also include I-14?
Probably not, and only because I-14 is further down the hallway. The impacts, I think, were all here and here relative to this diagram. So that doesn't seem to fit.
So it couldn't ricochet off the
I don't think
wall
this
with the
performance
metal
makes it
door and then
particularly
from
helpful.
there flooring there?
This was a downward impact, and as far as I can recall, all of the ones with the arrows are what I would call primary impacts. What that means is that's the first spot the bullet hit. And the reason I would say that is the bullet appeared to be stable. The initial impact site had a
If rule
symmetrical
number
shape.
1 of being
Once
a
the
lawyer
bullet loses its stability,
is don't
however,
ask a
it starts to
question
tumble.
you don't
Now, the
already know
path
what the answer
may
is
continue,
going to be.
but the orientation of the bullet.
Rule
Then
number
she
two
can't
is
ask
don't
any
travel
questions
the hall.
whatsoever.
And so that's
Rule
why
number
these
2 is
ones
don't ask
overall
ask
appear
a
to
question that you know jack all about.
non-circular impact shapes.
Yeah, I mean, part of lawyering is that you often have to get up to speed to be a sort of half-assed expert in a lot of things a lot of the time.
That's
right?
why you
Like,
hire That's why you hire experts.
yeah, well, it's also
It's
why you
to
sit
learn.
down and talk with them and you learn so that you can cross-examine. And she's just like, I've seen a movie with a gun in it. I'm good.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is a good example.
It's
What we
not
have here
good.
is an impact
And by the way, not for
location
nothing. How do you know
starting there.
nothing at all about
The damage
firearms in New
that's really
Mexico?
obvious tends to be downrange. Of
She
that
could have
impact.
done better prep for this trial by watching like a John Wick movie, and she'd be
As the
ahead
bullet's
of where
coming
she is
in,
now.
traveling this direction, and it's striking.
I mean, again,
in a
my
nice,
background
forward,
is
stable
New York
orientation.
and Florida,
This is likely the primary impact.
where
site.
New
First
York
thing
you
the
basically
bullet
can't
hits
have a
is
firearm.
this
In
area
Florida,
of the
you
bullet.
can't have open carry.
Now, it could ricochet from here and possibly even.
I'm not
diverge
considering
slightly,
myself an expert
but
in any
generally
way,
speaking,
but
the
I know more
departure
than
would be
she
along this
does.
line, which would separate it from the angles of the others. Now, that said, this line may converge with some of the other lines that we've talked about, producing, say, shots into the door and exiting the structure. So all of them could converge at one location and be part of the same shooting sequence and position. But I wouldn't associate 14 with the other shots in terms of continuing trajectories.
So let's talk about the muzzle pattern. And putting under the document camera, State Exhibit 51. So a flash hider, I think when we talked about, you said is used to separate the burning components at the muzzle and reduce or eliminate the flash. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that flash is a ball of fire.
Typically, yeah. If there's no flash hider, you see a really nice, bright, football or basketball shaped flash.
Okay. Would continuous shooting, like 11 times, make that barrel pretty hot?
Yes.
That's the issue in a
So
nutshell.
it would be hot to the touch.
It may be. It would depend on ambient temperature. 11 shots is enough that it would certainly warm it up. Would it be too hot to the touch? I don't know.
Okay.
Prosecutors in this county are not used to this
Can we agree
defense.
that there were 11 fired
I want to
casings
add to that
recovered here?
because you're
That's
right.
the information I got from the lab report.
But that
from the
is
state lab.
also the problem. Is that
Okay, but there could be potentially more or
purpose
less
of the
because they
prosecutor
just
is
recovered what
serve
was on scene.
justice.
That's also a possibility.
That
Now,
shouldn't
when
be
I interviewed you, and
an
I
issue.
believe that you
They
testified
shouldn't
on
bring the
direct
case in the first
examination,
place, 'cause
that you
imagine
believed
somebody
the
who
gun
doesn't
was
have
being
sort of
forced downward and
they just get
upside
railroaded.
down.
Correct.
Is that correct? How do you know it's being forced downward? Couldn't it just be held in that position?
I'd say that's a possibility too. I'm trying to think of a reason anyone would intentionally hold the gun in that orientation, and I can't come up with one. So my most logical assumption is that it was being forced down during a struggle.
Okay, so that's your assumption, but someone could potentially just hold the gun. in
Well,
that
I am an
position and fire
expert,
it 2 times.
and that seemed
That's
really
exactly
dumb.
what I did with my test shots. I just
So-
there deliberately upside down, fired.
You know.
I didn't. This friend of mine did.
And just to be clear, you can't age impacts, is that correct?
That is correct. It's almost impossible to sequence even
Oh,
shots
now we're
like
going to say we
this
don't know when the
with
shots
far
happened.
range
That
shots
could have been
that
any
are separated
time.
by a long distance in time. There's some
What?
exceptions to that, but for the most part, shots fired days apart will look the same, depending on the target.
So
Okay, so
now the
because you
state is
can't
openly
age
questioning that those
With scientific
those
certainty,
are
correct,
from the day
that
of the incident. The
possible
shots
that
that
those
they
marks were
examined are
there
from that
before the
day.
homicide?
They're
It's
openly
like 3 weeks
They're
ago.
openly
Is it possible
questioning
the
that they're
marks were
tied
put
to the
there
murder.
after the homicide?
I suppose
Okay,
it's a possibility.
sure, why not?
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your test.
Isn't that literally the definition of introducing reasonable doubt?
Yep.
I interviewed you again on October 27th.
I don't think the state knows where they are or what they're doing right now.
And when I initially interviewed you on October 6th, you
Somebody's
had not
going to
done
be like,
any
hey, you
test
did a
Is it
great job.
possible
But
that all these marks on the
You had
floor are
formed your
completely
opinion, but you
unrelated to
had
the
not
murder
done
in
any
every
test
way? Yeah.
fires yet to
Yeah,
support
they
your
might have
opinion,
nothing to do with
correct?
the murder. You're
Not
100%
in the
correct,
combination of
government.
routine,
That's
I've
great.
done other shooting that did validate my
All right.
opinion, but
I'm getting whiskey now.
Okay, but so you did your test fires. Would you remember what day you did them?
This is what I would do
don't recall.
as a defense attorney when I got
I
nothing.
could probably look
It's
at
possible.
the photos and ages of the photos and get that.
Yeah. Yeah, but this is the
That
prosecution.
reasonable doubt.
Done on the
I
first.
know. I get it.
It was definitely done days or weeks later.
Okay, and you told me at that time that every gun, and I think you said that on direct too, every gun and ammunition.
told me at that
combination
time.
is very different in how the residue.
Ammunition.
Yeah, I should say it can be different. If I said very, that was a misstatement on my part. But
You know
it
what?
is
I agree
possible
with the
to
defense
have
entirely on not
gun
objecting to it.
with
You
different
could,
ammunition and see different
but
results. It's also possible to have the
this
same
is just
ammunition
making them
with
look
different guns
stupider.
and see different results.
And I'm putting underneath the document camera.
Everything they say makes them look
We can
stupider.
agree that the top gun was.
And it's impressive every time because they've set the bar so far.
The bottom gun is the gun that you used. for
I
your
would
test
contribute
fires,
money
correct?
to her reelection as a member of the defense bar.
Yeah, no kidding. I was going to say,
Obviously, we can see that
this is because she's great for defense.
scope.
Guys, Muffin Radio, I understand hunting and fishing.
But you didn't
exception.
use any measurements.
I'm saying as a
correct, in
general
your test
rule,
fires,
open
any
carry is
measurements
not
of
allowed
the
in
gun that
Florida.
was used as opposed
Shut
to the
up.
gun in your test fires.
So the measurements that I could rely on, I didn't necessarily measure them, but I knew the barrel length was 16 inches.
This is
Set
what I
to
deal
here.
with.
because that's how this rifle is built.
General rules as
the
opposed
resources
to
I could
exceptions.
find showed the barrel length here on this model was 16 inches, and I looked at images of various gun types, and that was visually what this appeared to be. These
You
photos may
measure
not be
it.
at the same
That's-
scale, so the fact that this distance doesn't match this just means the cameras were at different depths. I
Yeah,
would
but
say
guess
whether
who
more
didn't measure
significant
it?
differences maybe than the barrel length, because those appear to be the same. Would
I'll
be the
give you a
fact
hint.
that,
It's the state.
the AR-15 rifle here, the gas
Like,
travels.
don't
all
make
the way down
assumptions
an
like
open
this.
tube
Oh yeah, the default
recycling the
configuration
action
is
during
16
firing.
inches.
So
Measure it.
there's more gas produced and delivered into the action here, whereas this firearm has a piston, so the gas only travels a short distance and drives a piston to the rear. It's a different mechanical operation, and that may or may not produce differences in the residue patterns.
That was actually my next question, sir. So you
Thank you.
already answered that.
Hey, guess what? A decent expert actually knew where the prosecution
You
was
also
going.
testified about the different types of flooring materials. Could that affect your test fires?
It is a possibility to try to simulate the flooring material from the actual shooting incident. All I had to go on was photographs. I took those photographs to a flooring supply store, verified their opinion matched mine, which was the laminated wood product flooring. But there's a variety of types of those, variety of thicknesses. I used 2 different types of material based on what I found that was available. I chose colors that more or less match the flooring here. But there's a variety of variables, and the ideal scenario to try to absolutely duplicate this would be to use the same firearm, the same ammunition, and if not identical samples of that flooring, actual sections of the flooring itself that hadn't been damaged.
Okay.
I also felt that for the most part, illustrating what I saw as significant didn't require that extra level of precision, so I wasn't too concerned that that wasn't available to me.
Okay, and when I interviewed you on October 6th, you said that the measurements didn't really contribute to your opinion, correct?
That's correct.
And the weight of the firearm also didn't contribute to your opinion, correct?
Yes, that's also correct.
So let's talk about the differences between the two, between the one in the incident and then the one in your test fires. We can see that it has a different fixed iron sight, correct?
Correct.
What is the size difference?
That I don't know, and what I can tell
Yeah.
you is looking
I can
visually
disagree
at,
with
say,
you there.
the angle produced from the muzzle to the top of the front sight appeared similar to me. Again, I didn't measure the angles, and I didn't have the opportunity to inspect this particular firearm. I did make an attempt to find the same make and model, but was unsuccessful. I'm sure they're out there. They're less common than the AR-15 rifles that I had access to.
Would you agree that this one in your test fire appears to be longer in length?
The barrel isn't any longer. What are you referring
The
to?
fixed iron sight.
I don't really know. I don't have a measurement.
What does the iron sight have to
And
do
in your
with
test fires, you laid this
anything?
firearm.
Well, he doesn't know. She doesn't know. Nobody knows.
Yes.
So it's contact at the fixed iron sight.
Yes, I did several shots prior to that at different distances and angles, but ultimately the 2 that I used to try to most simulate what was seen at the scene was a contact shot where the floor sample was in this orientation. In direct contact, with the muzzle, and I can't draw a straight line today, sorry. The muzzle, tip of the muzzle, and the top of the front sight.
Okay. And in your interview on October 27th, you stated that that would probably be the most significant measurement was the rifle you used with the fixed iron sight to the.
That might have been the most significant measurement to have, but I would say my assumption is that differences in ammunition and probably differences in the gas system might produce greater differences in the actual residue patterns produced. I can't be certain about either of those, but that's my assumption.
Okay, and would the size of this scope affect the angles in any way?
In this case, I don't believe so, because the angle produced in this case.
Why would it ever?
is
It has
above
nothing to
that
do with the actual firing
scope
mechanism.
itself. And when I place the rifle here, lying in that orientation, the scope doesn't make contact when those 2 points do. Now, it's possible that there was a shallower angle and it might have interacted with this as well, which might have been another limitation, but I simply didn't have opportunity to test that.
Would that have added weight as well to the firearm?
Weight,
Weight, like heaviness.
the
if you're-
scope itself.
Yes. Would that
It
have that
was
in weight?
in a vice.
Like heaviness.
And I believe you testified on direct examination that the rifle used in the
No, it's
homicide
massive.
could have been less than 3 inches from the ground. Is that correct? That's what my notes state. Do you-
Yes, that sounds about right.
Okay. And that's what would have likely produced those patterns in the flooring.
Correct.
Okay. Now, you talked a little bit about the ammunition. What was the difference in the ammunition?
As far as I know, the only difference was a manufacture date of about 5 years.
Oh, that would be a dream.
Product, if you will. It's a military specified spec product, so it's probably very consistent. But there's no way to be sure if they didn't change powder sources or formulations across that 5-year period of time.
And was the grain count the same?
The bullets are the same. You mean the powder charge or the bullet?
Yes.
I wouldn't know with the powder charge whether it was the same weight or the same type of powder.
Do you mean the powder charge of the bullet? Yes.
Could that affect the muzzle pattern?
Cartridge.
Yes.
Okay, what about the magazine? Did you take that into account when you did your test fires?
No, and I don't think the magazine would have any impact.
Why
on
would the
muzzle pattern
magazine make a
because
difference?
The moment of
wouldn't.
firing is a very
It
instantaneous
doesn't.
moment. The
It's
magazine
just-
would
It
only
has
relate to
literally
something.
nothing to do with the
That's
actual
only
firing
way
mechanism.
It would interact with these data.
What about someone's ability
I
to
have
hold it
forgotten
upside
my
down if it's a
magazine at
30
home
round
and
magazine?
spent a day shooting without one.
Again, if it's upside down, the magazine's upward, so it may or may not have any relation to how it's being held.
What about weight? Would it add weight?
At least
to the
she's not
firearm?
calling it a
It could
clip.
add a little bit of weight in either case.
Yeah, there is that.
Would the magazine add weight?
let's
Oh
talk
yeah, that's definitely going to
about
change the
size of
ballistics.
the room. Actually, let's still stay on the impacts. This is State's Exhibit 51. You talked a little bit about signs of a struggle. Did you take into
It's a little
account
cold
the
that afternoon
items
at
that
the
are
range.
hanging on the wall if there were a struggle in this room?
I did not. I had no way of knowing if those items were there all along or if they had been dislodged during the
No,
Okay.
I didn't.
I'm pushing this same photograph downward. And it appears that there's a mirror leaning against the wall, correct?
I see that
Have you ever been in a mobile home before?
many times, yes.
Okay. Are the walls pretty flexible in a mobile home?
I think it depends on their construction.
Flexible.
I've been in perfectly built single-family houses that have flexible structures too.
Who
Now, let me ask you another
cares?
Flexible mobile home walls? What is?
I don't know how far
What are flexible
Why
mobile
does it
home
matter?
walls?
The flexible
She's going to
walls.
try to take this guy out of his area of expertise to ask him
Is it
random
likely?
questions.
But on
I
a
don't know
very
about
technical
flex-
level, why is it relevant? Why does it matter?
Your audiola's booth.
Well, I just want to know
I
such a thing
definitely-
exists.
Who
An
cares?
educated call based on this photo.
My mobile home is, the walls aren't flexible.
Would it be better to view it on a digital screen?
It
perhaps?
might be, while you were zooming in, I saw something on the wall that looked like it could be an impact.
Counsel, can you identify which photo we're looking at? 51?
At this point, I think she's trying to run out the clock till we get to 7. My time. Their time would be 5. I actually think she's just trying to run out the clock, and I've seen this as a strategy before. Because the defense is going to rest once he's done.
You think?
And she doesn't want to have to do.
My
Yes,
chat
I want
always
more.
gets it.
Does anyone disagree with me? Lawyers in the chat?
I can't tell if she's running out the clock or if she's just not good. There's a lot of overlap between those two concepts.
This is fair.
I don't know.
Because we know that the defense is going to rest on
On
it.
my screen.
I agree,
I don't know. I
Judy.
mean, the defense didn't have to call anybody. I'm not sure what they're going to do.
Loretta, can you help me?
Rest or dance?
Oh, here we go. You got to go to the
Oh,
side.
man.
That's the trick here.
If they rest, though, that means the stupid comes to an end.
That's all right. That means that we have one more day and we're done. And I
digital
can actually get back
photograph,
to
a better
real life
photograph.
stuff.
It definitely is a better photograph.
Less pixels.
At least we're not learning
Is it
anything, though.
likely that
We're definitely
that
not.
could
That's for
potentially
sure.
be a ricochet
I think
impact?
that's key here.
Or is it possible that it could potentially be a ricochet impact on Mr. Audiolo's boob?
I think you're referring to this spot here. Is that correct? Or are we referring
No, on the toe.
to the toe there?
Yes, sir.
I suppose it is possible. Very difficult to tell from this viewing. I would certainly want to inspect the boot itself. When you were zooming in, I saw this, and this looked like a likely bullet impact as well. That could have been a ricochet. So it might be in the same vicinity. This particular impact, if it was an impact, could also come from another part of the struggle if there's a downward shot fired.
Okay.
Why did none of this come out in direct? Oh, God.
Could it potentially come from a downward shot from this muzzle mark that way?
I would say a possibility could exist. There's two problems. The first is it's unclear, and in my testing at 20 degrees, the shots that entered at that angle typically went through the floor. Now,
Chat,
the ones
am I
that you
on
saw in the
crack, or
video
did
came
it
back
not
out because
address
the
this
floor
at
was
all
on the
indirect?
soil and it ricocheted off of that surface. But the ones that were shot at 20-degree angle from the apparatus went clean through. So first, it would have to verify that a ricochet occurred.
Right.
The other problem I see is this is very shallow. So for this to occur, that departure angle would have to be skimming the floor surface. And I haven't done ricochet studies on this type of material to know, but very often wood is what we call a yielding surface. So the ricochet, the departure angles tend to be more substantial than would produce an impact like that at this angle as we see it in the image. I would expect a higher hit somewhere up if that were a ricochet and a departure angle on wood. But to be fair, I have not tested this particular type of material for ricochet departure angles.
So it could ricochet up and potentially be up here? Is that a possibility?
Yeah,
Sorry.
possibility, sure.
There's a glare up here that I can't quite see. Okay.
I'm trying to clear it, and I think it's not letting me. There we go.
I think it's too late to change careers and go to med school.
You really want her performing medicine?
I meant me.
Oh, I thought you meant her, and I was like, "Oh my God,
When I
man, you're
interviewed
gonna get
you,
somebody killed."
sir, you also told me that there could
Kurt, I looked
potentially
into
be
it,
a
and
3
it
to
takes
5 degree
way too many
variance with
credits in
angle measurements.
science
Is that
than
correct?
I have.
Yes, and it's widely accepted that anytime you do a measurement, like for a trajectory rod going through a structure,
Yes, he's an excellent
you can't rely
witness.
on your measurements
Excellent.
to be 100% accurate in all circumstances. So as a general rule, when those measurements are recorded, there's a
He's doing a
presumption or
brilliant
even
job.
a little description that the measured angle could be anywhere from 3 to 5 degrees either way.
Now, in the Scooby-Doo show, you said that you can read the evidence,
dear.
maybe decide what likely happened, correct?
Sure.
In the Scooby Doo show?
This is States Exhibit 62.
Yeah.
Are they about to unmask the ghost?
Now, the majority of the spent casings were along
You know,
this
in fairness, Kurt,
wall, correct?
with an engineering degree, you
I
might
believe
have
so,
enough
yes,
science
in the general
credits to be
vicinity
able
where
to make it
those
work.
green markers are.
Okay. However, there was one.
There's always psychiatry.
And I'm
Yeah.
looking under the documents camera, States Exhibit 45. Here it is. Let me see if zooming in helps out. There was one documented casing partially under the bunk bed, correct?
Yes, I see that.
What side of that firearm do spent casings expel from?
Should I pick it up and?
Yes, sir. Please show the jury.
And point it at you.
The ejection port on the firearm is right here where my fingers
That's
are.
not been a problem today.
Cartridge cases will come out of this side.
Notice
of the gun.
again how he's not pointing the
Now they may
weapon
come out
at
a,
anyone.
an angle forward
because
or
he's
back,
handled
they
a
may go
weapon
up, or they
before.
might go straight out. It's hard to be sure without.
He's got trigger discipline.
Okay, and for purposes of
Yep.
the record, from the shooter, you're pointing
That was the
towards the right
stupidest thing
side.
about
That's correct.
Officer
Typically,
Moron
most
is he had his
ejection
freaking
patterns
finger
are
on the
to
trigger
right,
the
slightly
entire
to the rear.
time.
Rifles
Wow.
tend to vary a little more than that. I've seen a number of rifles eject forward.
I seem to remember that in the
Does it
basic
matter
rules
if
of
you're
gun
right-handed
safety.
or left-handed? Is that why?
It can matter.
What was it? The basic rule of gun safety: keep your finger on the trigger at all times.
Point this at something you want to destroy or you don't want to destroy and pull
Okay.
the trigger
So
repeatedly.
if the firearm was
I don't
upside
think
down,
anyone ever told me to point it at the prosecutor or
then
the
the
judge.
spent casing would expel to the left side.
And I
of the
also point an
shooter
AR-15
if you
at
were
the
holding
prosecutor
gun,
because I mean, if that's a thing,
Yes, if I was
I'm
holding a gun
available.
like this,
I'd be very careful with those statements.
So would we expect
Only
to
if I'm
see
asked.
2 spent casings at least in this room on this side of the room?
there's a possibility you would see that.
Okay.
I would certainly.
She's never been to a range in her life and has never seen brass and where it ends up after.
They can be moved, they can be kicked,
And by the
they
way,
can
in
roll,
fairness,
correct?
I've only ever
Or
done
They
shotguns.
could impact.
So as long as I
casings
keep
could
that
impact
over
metal bed frame
the edge
and
of the
bounce back and
range.
landed in the corner. And likewise, this cartridge case here.
But I'm not
could
stupid.
have bounced from one of the other shots and landed there.
Now I'm putting underneath the document camera, States Exhibit 46.
It doesn't take an IQ over room temperature to understand that
And
you
I
don't
believe
point
this
the
was
weapon at
identified as
anything you're not willing to destroy.
number 12 in the state police report. And that's a spent casing on that plastic bin, correct?
I believe so.
Does that tell you a piece of the story?
Again, same answer. Basically, it's these ejection cartridge cases are coming out of the gun with a certain amount of force. There's lots of walls and objects they can hit and bounce. So I wouldn't make any
Also-
attempt to interpret that location beyond that shot was probably fired in this room.
Okay. Can you say that that bin was there at the time of the shooting?
Based on this photo, I'm not sure. I believe there was blood evidence on the bin.
Yes, I can say with relative certainty that unless they
Appears to
literally
correspond to the
fucked
location
everything
seen
up,
where the blood has
that the
pooled,
pooling
say, at the bottom
pattern is
in the
consistent.
other photos.
Okay. So it's likely that that plastic tub was in the room, correct?
Yeah, that's reasonable.
And especially since there's a spent casing on the top of it.
Correct.
Correct. And that lid is partially open.
Looks to be, yes.
Is that the spent casing that they ended up putting
But you
under
can't
it?
tell any information where the shooter was when that spent casing ejected from the gun, correct?
No, I wouldn't risk it.
During your interview, we talked about, and on direct examination, we talked about the OMI and the different distances that the doctor had determined the shots to the body were.
Correct.
So the shot to the head was determined to be intermediate, correct?
Yes.
And that's because there was stippling?
I don't recall the exact description, but there were some kind of gunshot residues indicative of a close range discharge, but not a contact shot.
Okay. And then the shot to the chest was
No
determined
one
to be
is
distant, correct?
contesting this didn't happen in close quarters.
Although I believe the
What are we
determination
talking
is
about?
Strictly off the examination of the body.
I don't know where she's going
Any
with this.
analysis of the clothing may have been superficial.
The argument
done,
is self-defense.
but that type of analysis for distance usually.
Yeah.
involves
So the argument is,
magnification.
so he was in range. Okay.
And or chemical testing.
Could the difference in
What he said
distances,
multiple
is there a
times-
possibility that it could come from someone walking towards the shooter?
That could be a possibility, yes.
Yeah,
Or the shooter
defendant
walking
said he got
towards
knocked
the
down
person being
multiple
shot?
times
Yes.
and was crab walking on the ground,
Sorry, I apologize. I think I was
got
answering
backed
this
into
question
a
a little
corner,
shorter, but the answer is
and decided to start firing.
All right. So
That's the end of the theory.
in your opinion that
And you're
there was
proving it.
likely a struggle, did you take into account the size of this room?
It was a small room, but I think you can have a struggle in a very small
The
space.
jury's like, stop. He's
So
already
Agent
acquitted.
Pereira had testified he was in this room for 8 hours processing the scene. He's the
Excellent
one who did the
reference.
rods and documented everything. He said he believed the room was about 8 by 10.
Okay.
Okay. Can you
Okay.
show the jury what an 8 by 10 room looks like?
Do you have
Put on
one
the
in your
walls.
pocket?
Helping
Put on the
you.
walls flexible.
I do.
That makes a difference.
Fantastic, sir.
I think the jury can just imagine in their mind what an 8x10 room looks like. It's
Let's make it more obvious that he was in a concealed space and did not have a means of egress. Good. How does that help you?
I'm wondering if she hasn't just been given marching orders of like, you have to run this case, and she's like, I think this guy should be acquitted. So let's just.
oh my
do
god,
that.
they got the blue tape, baby. Oh yeah.
Are you serious? They got the painter's tape?
Yeah.
We're gonna mark it on the floor.
Oh dear.
What side is she on again?
I don't know.
Does she
I
know?
really don't know. This doesn't help her.
Maybe we can have the defendant come back and reenact the whole thing within the blue box now.
The defense doesn't need any redirect on this yet that I can see.
I think the defendant come back up and reenact the thing with the
I think you just
supervision
rest.
of the police inspector guy.
Yeah, I missed the skit earlier, so let's have him reenacted in the blue box.
Can we give him the gun again and have him pointed directly at the prosecution?
Yeah.
It depends. You can have the bailiff actually.
We're
do
gonna
it
take
or not.
tape measure and mark out obvious measurements. That okay.
Are they going to set up like a D&D grid for this? And
I have a movement speed of 5. It means I can clear the room in 2 moves.
So wouldn't he have gotten an attack of opportunity in this?
Okay, I'm assuming that's a yes. Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, Kurt, get me an invitation to Lawyers and Dragons.
You have to
I
talk to
can
Richard
raise
Hogue about that one.
Yeah, you'd have to raise that with Hogue.
I want to do that.
I can't get myself an invitation to Liars and Dragons.
Oh, then we'll do our own.
Yeah, we should do our own with blackjack and hookers.
I can run something at some point.
Ian, you keep saying that. Let's get it going.
We have taped out
I
what
need
would
to
be
do
an
that.
8 by 10 room.
Yes.
For the jury's
I'm always lawful
visualization.
evil, just so
Now, this room also had a twin-size bed, correct?
I don't know the exact.
We're now
dimensions of the
asking
bed.
about how big it is compared to a twin size bed.
So, your analysis is as good as mine.
Well, it would have been nice if the actual police investigators took measurements, but they didn't.
I'm afraid I really don't know.
You're asking if you believe it to be a queen size bed or not based on the
There's also
photograph.
some bunk beds in there too, right?
Yes.
That sounds
And
like
there was
speculation.
Plastic bin.
I don't know.
by the
I'm
way,
not an
it's not
expert in
queen-size.
beds.
Yes.
So that would have left very little room for a struggle, correct?
That's the defense's argument. Yes, correct.
Oh,
there was
good
very
Lord.
little room for a struggle. Right. No chance to evade, no chance to escape. It was mano a mano in a confined small space. You are correct.
The photograph, I think it was 31.
I see Law and Lumber
I
super
don't know why
chat.
you don't just come on. I don't know why you don't. He's pretending he's doing a motion.
If she starts actually painting, I'm just going to be like, this is perfect.
Is it possible? Let me rephrase that. Is it possible
No,
that
you can't ask questions
the
like
rifle would have hit
It's
the wall?
possible that I'm asleep and this is
Being
all
that it was
bad
such a
dream.
Anything
small room
possible.
with some kickback from the firearm.
I think it is possible, if not likely, that one of the shots, more likely even the
I've had dreams about law tube streams before.
length
Maybe
of the
this is one
rifle
of
may have
those.
made contact with the wall It's possible both of them could have done it, but I think the one that's got the sort of more dramatic angle in this image.
Oh my God,
was
I'm way
closer to
too
the wall,
sober.
could have made contact with the wall.
Let me just make sure I got everything, sir. 1 minute.
Oh, thank God, they're finally done.
Sweet Jesus! What?
What keeps happening there?
That's Mike.
Mike pushes the button.
In this small room, if there was the possibility of a struggle for the gun, is it possible to crab walk holding that firearm and using the other hand to fight someone off?
Yes.
I don't.
Yes,
I
that
think
was my
crab walk, and I
conclusion.
have an image in my head of what that means. My image may or may not be what everyone else thinks of. I think it's possible for a struggle to happen in this confined space. Crab walking may be part of that physical activity.
We don't convict people to
While
prison for the
holding
rest of
that,
their
how
life
much
for
do you think that
anything is
firearm weighs?
possible.
The prosecution should never be asking, is it possible questions unless they know the answer is no.
Approximately 9 pounds.
Yes.
Okay. May I have a moment, Judge?
Because their burden is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecution can't live in the realm of possible.
Okay, I'm assuming that's a yes. Okay.
We don't put people in prison for the rest of their life on an is it possible question.
Yeah.
God damn it.
Sorry, sir. I did think of one other question, and I'm going to use your
Oh, great. We thought of another question.
I told you they're trying to run out the clock, and this will probably be the last witness for tonight.
This is page 17 of the aid that you've provided.
Yes.
You said that these potentially could be burns.
I wouldn't describe them as burns. I would call them residue patterns similar to those produced on the surface of the flooring, which means that they're not burns, but they're dark sooty residues coming from close range contact with the source.
Is it likely for those things to come off if someone washes their hands with soap and water?
They will come off to a certain extent, but it will depend on how much scrubbing you do. I've had them persist to the point that I'm washing my hands normally longer than you would for routine hand.
Yeah, they're a pain to get off.
This is not an
And,
issue.
Can you get those marks from holding the gun in a regular fashion like you showed us on direct
This
examination?
is not
I don't know for
an
certain.
issue in dispute. Oh my
There's a
God.
possibility that if gas vents through the holes in the
Alright.
bottom,
We're doing it.
that could occur. I think it's not likely because I don't think they would put vents here if it would routinely.
This is not a
score
fact in
residues
dispute.
on the hands, but it is a possibility. There are other gaps where gas can come out. My first
Yeah,
thought
I
would
am
be
about to pop.
possibly the magazine well if there's gases coming out there, or maybe somewhere around this vicinity. But without testing, it's basically just speculation on my part of where those residues could come out of this gun, and I can't be certain that these residues are what we're describing. They could be, those dark spots could be dark from somebody
Maybe home chef.
taking hands and taking oil.
Some touching something dirty like a car tire, or it could come from
You
anything.
can't drive now, so
So we don't know what that is.
crab walk might
For
be.
sure, anyway.
I might go walk in front of a train.
Is it possible that this is your first trial?
For your expertise.
It depends on the type of case. My regular
Oh, they
rate is
always ask that.
$200 per hour. I have different rates for different clients.
215. That's not bad at all.
No, that's cheap as experts
What
go.
will you be paid in total?
How much
for
did
your
they say an hour?
Testimony.
$215.
In this case.
Oh, that's
In
nothing.
total.
Yeah, this guy's
Testimony is
practically
duration
free.
a year. I don't have my invoice complete at this point. I honestly don't know. And the most of my time is spent work up to and prior to this testimony.
So how much do you anticipate making for your testimony in this case, or for your testimony and your preparation and your interviews and everything, all the work? you've done
Usually
in
the
this
prep
case?
is 10
I
times
really
the
don't have
hourly
a
rate.
number. I can't think of. I really don't know.
215 is
I
nothing.
can tell you, I spent all day driving yesterday and then several hours preparing last night. And when I added that day up, it was under 2,000, but very close. And that was for a very long day.
Kathy, the relevance is it goes to credibility.
That's not
And then
bad.
you did work
When you have a
subsequent
paid
to
expert.
driving and testifying today.
Well,
Before that,
prior
right?
to,
Prior,
yes.
yes. How many hours do you think you've put in on this?
You sure did.
I honestly don't remember. I apologize.
All right. I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
Thank God.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, it is a double rainbow. I cannot believe it. It's
See any measurements of the bedroom in any of the evidence?
My experts were usually
So this
650
8x10 tape
or so.
that the prosecutor had you mark
Now
off
we're
on the
depending upon
floor.
this.
What is
All right,
that
I
based
I
on?
gotta go.
believe it
This
was
is
based on an estimate by
destroying my will to live. But
Okay.
thanks for having me on.
That's what she
We'll
said,
have to
but
do this
you didn't
again.
actually
Thanks
see
for coming by,
measurements.
Ian.
Is it possible that room was
I
larger?
promised Mike I would see him through this.
We don't know
And
because
Kurt,
no one measured it.
check the
As far as
Discord.
I know, it wasn't measured.
I'm trying to get stars the number going.
Okay. Bye.
States Exhibit 51. This would be the photograph that the prosecutor showed you of the room, and it shows some things hanging on the wall.
She is literally trying to drag this out.
If
to
there's
end the
a
day.
fight going on down here, what would you expect to happen over here against this wall?
I really don't have an opinion. All I would say is I can imagine someone colliding into something on the wall or a wall, disrupting that wall, and maybe not disrupting another wall at the same time. The
And-
dynamic.
Have him get down in the tape
The fight
circle
is
thing there, in
occurring
the
where
tape
one
room.
person is repeatedly tackling another on the floor.
Why do we
Would
decide
it
to
be
tape
reasonable
off
to
the
believe that maybe
area
nothing
of
would be
the room?
disturbed over here?
I think that's a reasonable possibility, yes.
Why was that a thing?
Prosecutor asked you about a mirror that's on the wall.
You're measuring 8 by
Do you
10,
recall
but we
that
don't know why because we didn't measure the
Do
room.
you know how that mirror is affixed to the wall?
I do not.
The prosecutor asked you a series of questions regarding the test firing that you did in this case. Do you recall her asking you about the different guns you used?
Yes,
And do you recall her asking you about the flooring materials?
correct.
And do you recall her asking you about the sight on
Yes.
the different guns?
All of the above, yes.
If that testing that you conducted had been done by the New Mexico
I'll talk with Mike. We really
crime
need the
lab
crap
here,
dance.
would that be
at this
information you
point.
could have used?
It's the only way to end this stream.
Would you have needed to recreate that testing if the crime lab here in New Mexico had done it?
Most likely not.
Yeah, I get it's
And to be clear, the crime lab in New
I get
Mexico
it.
is capable of that kind of testing.
I believe so. It's a reconstruction type.
How-
of
how
testing.
would he know
There's
about-
also gunshot residue analysis, and I know they've done gunshot residue testing.
I'm from Arizona. I don't know about the New Mexico crime lab.
The prosecutor asked you some questions regarding impact sites 11 and 12. And could you just explain again what impact sites 11 and 12 are?
Those are the two that had visible dark scorch marks that corresponded to the ports on the upper part of the flash hydrant.
And just for reference, I'll just publish the diagram you had made. So impact sites 11 and 12 with the scorch marks there. The
Correct.
prosecutor asked you some questions and basically said, isn't it possible those marks were put there after Mr. Areola had been shot?
I cannot make a distinction between shots in time. So as a physical reality, it is a possibility they could have been placed after.
And if somebody was placing those impact sites after Mr. Areola was already deceased, what would they have had to do to position themselves to fire those shots?
To best of my knowledge, they would have had to hold the gun upside down in likely direct contact with the floor, possibly direct contact with the wall, and fire the shots from that position.
And would they have had to have been pretty much draped over Mr. Ariola's body in order to do that?
Possibly, yeah.
Well, it's a small room, right?
Yeah, I don't think of another way that could be done.
Oh,
unless they
good
were
Lord.
standing up here somewhere, and even then, I don't know if they could reach.
It's a small
But the
room. and
tub's
it
up
was dark.
there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's true.
So I guess the person would have had to have lain across the body and fired those shots.
Or stood
I have,
over. or crouched
I
over
have a
something.
problem with them introducing.
Or stood over, but they would have had to bend down so that the gun was almost on the floor, correct?
Well, I think it would have to be on the floor to a certain extent. I can't be absolutely certain it was contact, that the gun was in contact, but that fits my testing to the best.
Am I hearing this correctly? Are they basically suggesting?
And Exhibit 51 again, the prosecutor asked you some questions regarding some tiny little, almost some tiny little.
Are they suggesting?
I don't even know
a
what to describe
conspiracy
that as.
theory?
Marks
Or
of
am I
something
missing
on
something?
the toe of Mr. Ariola's boot.
There appears to be, in this image,
Yeah.
a slight defect in the toe of the boot. Whether that's related to any kind of impact or gunshot, I don't know. I've worn boots that get scuff marks on the front and the toe all the time. Without even looking at that boot in person, I wouldn't begin to speculate on what.
Right. So those boots, do they look brand new?
I really can't be sure from the photo.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Who could have looked at those boots and made a determination about whether there was some sort of an impact site on them?
I believe the state crime lab could have done that. I could have evaluated them as well.
What does that look like?
The first image, it looks like a possible bullet hole through the wall.
Did you see any indications that the police had found that impact site in any of their reports, photos, diagrams?
No, but I also can't be certain it's a bullet hole, and maybe a direct observation may have made it obviously not. I can't tell from this photo.
And just going back to that suggestion by the prosecutor that the scuff mark on the boot was a ricochet, what do you think the likelihood is that that is a ricochet?
Very unlikely given the position of the body and the material that the ricochet would have had to come from in that position.
She also talked to you about the location of casings. Let's see if I can find the photo. There we go. Do you recall the prosecutor showing you this? This is Exhibit 45, State's Exhibit 45.
I do.
And in particular, the prosecutor asking you questions about this casing right there.
Correct.
That casing being located there, does it tell you anything?
The most I would venture on an opinion is that cartridge case is consistent with having been fired from inside that room.
And that's because casings can get kicked.
They can be moved after the fact, but they can also bounce at the moment of firing and land in a variety of locations in a confined space.
And would it be possible that if a gun is fired upside down, where impact sites 11 and 12 were located in that room,
yes,
right? So you have the gun upside down firing almost directly into the floor. And as the prosecutor established, the casings would eject, I guess, to the left.
In the direction where this one was, more or less, possibly.
And if there was a struggle going on right there, is it possible that someone could have kicked the casing and it landed there?
Yes.
Compare the damn photos.
Prosecutor asked you about a series of hypotheticals, one being that the
Casings
shooter
moved
was up on
between
the bunkbed.
photos.
Yes.
What do you think of that possible scenario?
It's an unusual location. I wouldn't go so far as to call it absurd or impossible, but it's doesn't seem to fit everything else. Also, were that the location of a shot fired into the body would still have to be bent substantially at the waist so that the trajectory would correspond to the vertical axis of the torso.
How does that hypothetical scenario from on top of the bunk bed explain impact sites 11 and 12, the upside down ones on the floor?
I don't see any relation. The only thing I would say is those other two shots, because the gun was upside down, are most consistent with some kind of struggle when they were fired.
And the other hypothetical the prosecutor gave you was that the shooter was standing on the bed or was on the bed.
Yeah, I believe in my mind, I imagine crouching or sitting or something of that level on the lower bunk or that position.
Okay. And how do those correlate or work with the upside down impact sites 11 and 12?
Again, same answer, no relation. They would have to be from a different part of the event.
So how likely do you think either of those scenarios are?
I think being in or on the lower position of the bed during the midst of a struggle is a possibility. I think while we cannot sequence gunshots specifically, in the context of a struggle, it seems to be more likely that those two shots, 11 and 12, happened during the struggle and the fatal shots occurred sometime after. But I can't be absolutely certain from a forensic physical evidence perspective.
And the prosecutor asked you if you were getting paid for your work in this case. Obviously you are. In your full-time job working for the Arizona Department of Public Safety, are you paid for your work in that capacity?
Yes, I am.
Do law enforcement officers typically get paid for their work?
I believe so, yes.
No further questions.
Okay.
You think the prosecutor's getting paid for this shit show? I hope not.
Maybe she's a volunteer.
Probably shouldn't be any further.
All right. So did this happen? Was that it?
I don't know if it's it or not. That would require me to have hope.
What time would it be right now? 9:49. Maybe the defense rests and they go to closing argument tomorrow.
Let me ask you.
That'd be great.
Calling any other witnesses?
No, you're not in defense rest.
Okay.
Okay, defense rests.
Oh,
we are done for today.
Defense rests.
At 9:30, not 9 o'clock. Be here about I'd say about 9:20 or so. And actually,
Oh God! Don't make me wait another
to another room. We'll have you wait there until I'm done with. I have a hearing.
They're gonna stay and do jury instructions tonight. I'm not watching that. I'm just telling you now.
We'll be in recess.
I'm out. I need to watch a fight over jury instructions.
There's only one charge, Kurt.
I won't leave too soon because last time I left, they did the motion that we were waiting for.
I decided to finally go to sleep, and I freaking wake up to like 12 people texting me.
I did manage to get back on. I was talking to Ben after our stream, and then,
When did that happen
we
for
got
the
done
dismissal
chatting,
of the other charges? Was that this morning?
Speaking of which, Ben, you got to see this.
Wait, the dismissal of the charges. Did that happen
That's
this morning?
Friday, wasn't it? No, it's Friday. After.
All right.
They dismissed a tampering with evidence charge and kept the murder charge at the close of State's case.
Okay, yeah, I just didn't know when that happened. I wanted to go check that out too.
Yeah. I decided to finally go to sleep because I hadn't slept in like 3 days.
I don't know if the state's going to have any rebuttal. I don't know what.
Please no. Please God no.
Anyway, I have a sentencing on a homicide tomorrow, 8:30 in the morning.
What are you going to rebut?
Everyone will be available. I'll take care of that. I'll make sure that the jury is actually far away. We're going to have.
What rebuttal could you possibly have?
Give it all for that. It's a first-degree homicide sentencing. We should be done by 9:15 or so on that case, so they won't come over here. A couple. I think we're getting ready to wrap this up. A couple of things. On defense, give me a clean copy of your proposed self-defense instructions. I only got the dirty copies, okay? Which are okay. I mean, the instructions, I just need a clean copy of them.
Dirty
And
copy.
those were 145171, 145190, and then the definition of great bodily harm. That is 14.
How about we just use the standard?
And on
Just use the model instructions. I'm sure they're fine.
the instructions are good, but I need for the state to, on that step down verdict instruction, let me give you the numbers that I think are appropriate. There's two numbers, 1460028.
All right, nobody needs to deal with that. We're gonna do something. We're gonna do something much more fun for 2 minutes here. Let me grab it.
All right.
Let me
while
grab
you're-
it.
I was going to say, this is a single charge. All you need is literally like 3 index cards.
Cross. They're doing a good job. When this happened,
In a court of law.
Kurt's already seen this. Look at this.
This nose is less stupid than
The prosecution not literally doing what the defense might have.
That's insane.
It's insane.
Whose
Yeah,
idea
call
was
the
this?
Reconstruction guy? We just had it.
That's one way to save money. I'm gonna try this my next trial. Let's role play here.
This
Couple
is so
scenarios.
strange. I've never seen anything like this. I don't even.
I haven't either. I've never seen this interactive interpretive dance with the witness in court.
It's crazy.
I mean, this is unbelievable.
This is this morning.
I think this is just bolstering his credibility too.
Look at that. Are you fucking kidding me?
This is so strange.
Oh, it gets better. It gets better. Wait. Look at this.
They're having the deputy make sure that the weapon is safe.
Oh, good Lord. We haven't done that before then?
Wow.
What is this?
All right.
What is this?
Maybe I should check that. Oh my God.
My goodness. This is New Mexico where guns just accidentally shoot themselves, right?
Somebody in the chat
Ask Alec
said
Baldwin.
that when he actually pulled the releaser, a round came out. I don't know if that's true. I did not see that.
Oh
But
my
Can
God.
you even imagine?
Oh.
Wow.
That was us in real time experiencing it this morning. We're like, I can't believe what I just witnessed.
Oh my goodness.
This
Yeah,
case
this
is
is
where
a
is
crazy one.
strange really fast.
What counties is it? This better not be where. Is this where Alec
Oh, I
Baldwin
forgot the
had
name of
his,
it now.
Like Sandoval?
Sandoval, yeah.
This isn't where
Sandoval County, New Mexico.
where Alec Baldwin
All
had
right.
his thing. I would like to see a reenactment of that.
Yesenia told me I have depositions tomorrow.
Okay.
On a good case, on a serious case.
Yes, sir, yeah.
So, John, you're it. You're it, buddy.
All right, I'll do it.
Are you doing it?
Yeah,
All right,
I'll
so
do
you do it. That's a bummer because we're probably getting a verdict tomorrow, and that verdict is not guilty. Spoiler alert.
Probably after today. Are you kidding me?
You can't.
So
You
what do we
cannot
got?
convict on the trial I just watched. You can't.
I mean, I'll be there, and everybody's got my Twitter. So anybody who wants to join, shoot me a DM, and we'll do the
I'm dead
jury.
inside.
Yeah, you do it. You send it out. I'll see if I can come by. But I mean, I've got 2 depositions back to back on a serious case, and I'm in.
Let me release a video so that I can see people on my channel can at least learn something today. Let's see what I got to release.
There was some learning going on there. This expert was excellent.
I thought the expert did a great job. This
Yeah,
is an
I mean,
example
and
of
you
an actual
contrast him with the state's experts, which were just like local law enforcement, and literally they'd be like, "Duh, I took some self-directed online courses." I'm not kidding you. That was.
Wow.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
I like to watch CSI.
And they were not good. And then the chief investigator saying, "Well, I can't remember anything because shortly after this I went into a coma."
Oh,
which I'm not laughing at him for going into a coma. That's horrible. But oh my God, find another way to make your case. Then you've got a huge hole in your case.
Now,
and you're
Cat
the
Virginia
state.
Cat Virginia just made a great point. Tomorrow's election day, so that's gonna. I don't know how to vamp for 2 hours, but we'll try our best.
Well, he's starting late because the guy's got the judge has what's it, Eichmann?
Sentencing.
Yeah, he's got a sentencing, so they're starting late. But so I mean, I don't know if the question is, are they going to do anything? Is the state going to come back with anything?
I can't imagine a rebuttal case at this point.
There isn't one, but I can't imagine anything that they've done so far.
Yeah, well, fair enough.
I mean, just because there isn't a rebuttal case doesn't mean that'll stop them.
I have no idea what they're going to argue. But the closing will be interesting.
Well, I mean,
and then I'm going to move right on to this case in Hillsborough County, Florida, where the guy.
But will they have will they have a jury? I mean, a verdict tomorrow? I mean, they got to go through what? Jury instructions, opening. I mean, the closing arguments,
statements, jury instructions, any rebuttal case,
mm-hmm.
and then they give it to the jury.
And the jury's. I just saw the jury's going to leave 2 hours early for election day.
No, I mean,
I don't know how open. And
he previously said he's going to let them go at 2:00 on election day.
You're entitled to 2 hours. So they're going to let them go if they don't come up with something. But we're down to one count. It's not like Darrell Brooks where you're going through, 24 counts. It's just the one.
I think they can get a verdict tomorrow and go vote. And have 3 cocktails before they go vote.
Can you drink in line? I've never tried that before.
But this is well, no, as a practical matter, I don't think that Mike's necessarily wrong. I think we might be able to get it tomorrow. And then I'm going to go and flip over. And I've been watching some of this Florida murder trial, which has been absolute. It's not a disaster in this sort of a way. It's just it's a little bit of a rough case, but it is local. So
well, get on it. Do you have any of it recorded?
No, I don't. But I'm just going to, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to run the lives and I'll catch up as I go.
Well, there you go. There you go. All right. So, I mean, I would do it. It's a bummer because we probably get a verdict tomorrow or Wednesday. I could see them running out the clock and giving it to the jury and the jury not having any time to deliberate and saying, screw it, we'll come back on Wednesday and render our verdict. I could see that.
Yeah. So I'm going to set up my thing. Mine is basically a gentleman that people are asking. It is, what is it? Terrence Florida versus Terrence Matthews, I believe is the name of the case. And it's basically a guy stabbed an ex-girlfriend in Michigan, came to Florida, and then murdered his girlfriend. So I think, and the prosecution so far has done a very professional case. So it might actually be a little bit of a palate cleanser after this nonsense.
This was.
It's still a terrible
case. Fun. I did not expect the defendant to take the stand. I did not expect the prosecutor to hand the defendant a gun to point at him. I did not expect Barney Fife to come and say, "Hey, why don't we clear that?" after it was pointed at the prosecutor.
All right, thank you, everyone. It's Matthew Terry. It's State of Florida versus Matthew Terry.
All right. Thank you guys for coming out. Yeah, that's it for the stream. I'm bummed, but I got serious business that I have to attend to tomorrow, or I'd follow it to the end.
It sucks having a job, doesn't it?
It does. I know. Ben earlier, he's like, "Oh, I want to cut on." I'm like, "Don't worry about it. We're doing the afternoon session." He's like, "Okay, great." But I'm like, I get it. You had stuff up.
You know what? It actually sucks a hell of a lot more when you have to pay your bills at the beginning of the month and you don't have one.
Yeah. There's that issue too.
Been there too. Been there.
Sucks either way, doesn't it?
Almost like life sucks and then you die. And Kathy Richardson,
the
wheels are in motion. Can I tell that to Kathy there?
Get that channel going. Everybody else go subscribe. But y'all go subscribe and like Kurt on civil law.
Yes, in the next 5 minutes or so, I'll be releasing a video about a coworker who took a bite out of another coworker at Yosemite National Park. So we're going to cover that story. That's going to come out in about 5 minutes.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's like for real? Like we're talking.
Yes, for real.
Like what's the word? I can't think when you eat a human. What is it? What's the
cannibalism?
word for cannibalism. Thank you. I could not recall that one. I knew there was a word
Donner
for it.
Party.
There was a little light cannibalism going on in Yosemite.
It's like
Is it Yosemite where
light capital.
Is it Yosemite where they have the zone of death?
That's Yellowstone, and I might have been Yellowstone, but either way, it didn't happen in the zone of death.
What's the zone of death? The place where they can't get a jury to convict you after you kill some people?
That'd be the one.
Yeah, there's no jury. There's actually
the no man land where all crime is legal.
Yeah.
It's like a sovereign citizen paradise.
Let's not tell them that.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they'll all move out there.
But yeah, what is it? It's like 10.
But if they move out there, then suddenly we'll be able to get a jury.
Right. Ironically, that'd be enough to get a jury. I love it. They'd all run out there and then they'd start getting convicted left and right. On crappy traffic offenses before they even get to capital things. Oh, that's good stuff. All right. Thank you guys. Seriously. Thanks to Ian who left already, but thanks to Rob who was in denial the whole time. He was obsessed with it. He was commenting every 20 seconds and it was funny. But I'm like, dude, you are not working on your motion. He claims to have been working on a motion. There's no motion. There's no motion practice during this. All right, you guys. Thank you all. Thanks everybody for coming out. Looks like it's going to be on John's tomorrow. So everybody go over there. All right. Good night.
Have a good night, folks.